across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Coming up to 3 minutes past 1, my thanks to Julia Hartley-Brewer, Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Ian Collins, and we've got a packed 3 hours for you. Breaking this afternoon, a mega dinghy is on fire in the Channel with over 150 undocumented people on board. Another day, another reminder of the scale of this crisis following the shocking scenes in the Spanish enclave of Ceuta just a week ago. Well, the Spanish used ships to tackle the problem and return many thousands of those men. So my question to you this afternoon is a simple one. We all pay our taxes, don't we, to have a military. So is it time to deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? Now, it'll be controversial. It will be a legal nightmare. The international community will be furious with us. We'll be worse than Russia and Belarus and North Korea. Who cares? What do you think? Is it the right thing to do? Should we deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? Now, it's all about your opinions. I want to get your thoughts on the radio and on the telly, so give me a call. My number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word TALK in your message to 87222. Leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. So much to get through, but let's kick off with Dolan's dispatch. Now, I've got to tell you that a couple of years ago, there was an excellent plumber that I employed, and his name was Vaclav. And I can tell you that in the morning, I went to work, I left my house, there was no bathroom. It was rubble, it was basically just completely derelict, right? I was without a bathroom, I was minus a bathroom, I was sans bathroom. There was no bathroom. My house was a bathroom-free zone. I go off to work. I came back in the evening. Admittedly, it was a long day, and I think he did about 12 hours. I came back, and there was a bathroom there with a sink, with tiles, with hot and cold running water. It was a power shower. It was an amazing thing. I'm like, how on earth did you do that? But this guy made a bathroom happen in 12 hours. I didn't know how he did it. I don't know how he did it. I never will know how he did it. You could give me a year and an unlimited budget, and I could not create a bathroom. But he did it in a day. And what I did is I paid him to do the job. And that's what we do as citizens. We pay our taxes so that the government can fix the potholes. Good luck with that. Employ police officers and have law and order on the streets. Again, good luck with that. Street lighting, energy supply. Again, I mean, all of it's terrible. Of course, everything we pay them to do is not happening. Public transport, you name it, schools. So we pay the authorities, we pay the government to run things on our behalf. And it's not our job to understand how it's done, but it is their job to do it. Because actually, we are customers. They're in the receipt of our money, the highest tax burden since the Second World War, and we'd quite like a service for the money that we pay in, which for most people is over 50% of their salary. Don't give me any of this baloney about, oh, the tax rate is, you've got your threshold and then you've got your 22.3%, then it goes up to 40% and the scale. Forget about that. That's not true. Because first of all, thanks to the freezing of the thresholds, lots more people have been dragged into the higher rate of tax. And the other issue is that it doesn't stop there. Because when you have a pint, you are taxed. And when you fill up your car with petrol, you are taxed. And when you switch on the radiator in your home because you've got the temerity of not wanting to freeze to death in the winter, you are taxed. So the bottom line is, with the stealth taxes, with income tax, with national insurance, with VAT, and of course then when you die, you're taxed all over again. You buy a house, you're taxed. Do you see the issue here? Do you see the trend? Do you see the theme? It's basically 50%. Half of your money goes to the Treasury. And so therefore, when it comes to illegal immigration, this is a service that we're paying for, which is secure borders. That's one of their jobs, is to have a secure border. We pay them to do that, and they are not doing their job. They're not providing the service for which we are customers and for which we are paying. And there's a lot of discussion about how complicated it will be to stop the boats. I don't care how complicated it is, Finlay. That's not my job. My job is elite level radio and TV host. That's my department, is the elite level broadcasting and the world-class journalismo. I thank you very much. Ably assisted by my team, including Jana, who's in the house. It's wrong to have favourites. Jana's my favourite. We've got Finlay, we've got Amy pressing the buttons and taking your calls, the co-producer of the show, Faith. So look, the bottom line is this. I don't know how, by the way, I don't understand their jobs. I don't know how Amy controls that machine and the buttons and the Jana broadcasting our live output. If you want to see the show, by the way, and my controversial choice of tie, head to YouTube, search Talk and Up We Pop. I don't understand how Faith can magic up these amazing guests every single day and put together this very crafted editorial. And then Finlay, our glorious leader, putting it all together in a sort of Spielberg fashion. All right? But I don't know. I don't understand their jobs. And I guess to a degree they don't understand mine. And that is how it's supposed to work. So the government have a job, which is to secure the border. And I don't want Andy Burnham telling me that it's all very complicated and it's against the law to use the Navy, etc., etc. As far as I'm concerned, the government have my consent to do anything to stop the boats. You heard me right. I now hereby, and maybe, shall we do like a letter? Shall I compose a letter or a petition or something? And do you want to sign this petition? And anyone that's on board with this, it will be composed as follows. Dear Mr. Andy Burnham, King of the North and now King Terrible Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. Dear Mr. Burnham, dear Andy, by the way, he won't get the letter because he's on holiday at the moment. So when he's back, once he's been to Florida for a couple of weeks and topped up his tan, because he's not quite gorgeous enough, when he's back, he'll get the letter and it will say, Dear Prime Minister, we, the British people, or the signatories of this letter, give you our full permission and consent to do quite literally anything to stop illegal immigration. Would you sign that letter? I'll compose it. Would you sign the letter that says, we, the British public, the signatories of this letter, give you permission to do anything? Because here's what we've got to do. We've got to tear up the ECHR, which is quite spectacularly a European set of laws to which we are bound. I thought we had Brexit. If I just like quickly Google it, I do believe that in 2016 we left. So why are we governed by something called the ECHR, the first letter of which stands for Europe? We're out. So tear up the ECHR, tear up the Human Rights Act, which is the most shocking legislative framework that makes it impossible for us to deport illegal immigrants, and it makes it virtually impossible to deport foreign criminals. There are 12,000 people on the prison estate at the moment who are from overseas, who have harmed British people, stolen from them, attacked them, sometimes murdered them, and we cannot ship them out thanks to the Human Rights Act. So that's gone. Then you've got the Refugee Convention, which is very worthy and was a wonderful thing after the Second World War. And let me tell you that one of the men involved in it, one of the architects, was Winston Churchill. Have you heard of him? But the world has changed, and of course the Refugee Convention has been exploited by the criminal gangs who take money from people to cross the channel. So that's got to go as well. And by the way, what we can do, I'm not a monster, we will create a new set of protections for genuine refugees, of course, as we always have. Just like I'm pro-immigration, just high integration, high value immigration, which of course was the norm in the 80s and 90s. But notwithstanding that, so ECHR gone, Refugee Convention gone, and the Human Rights Act gone. And then we have the final magic bullet, and it's the Navy. Because what is the point in having a Navy if they cannot police the border, if they cannot be in the sea with their frigates turning away these boats? Because it's threefold. First of all, it's a humanitarian crisis. Are the left not concerned that people are dying in the Channel? Secondly, it's an economic crisis because the cost of illegal immigration at the moment is £3 billion a year. And by the way, that ain't the half of it, because the majority of these predominantly young men will stay in the country. And because they're not all Welsh choir boys, surgeons and engineers, the majority will be dependents on the state for the rest of their lives. And the other issue is it's a national security crisis because we don't know who they are. How is it possible that a jumped-up radio and TV host gets it, but the establishment don't? How is it that I am here with clear 2020 vision about what's wrong with the country and why this is madness? Why do I get it and they don't? It should be the other way round. I should be on Magic Radio playing mid-60s Elvis hits. But it falls upon my shoulders, Finlay, to share with you my understanding that this is madness and it can't work. So bring the Navy in, and here's the big issue. The establishment are obsessed with our international reputation. So we've got our former Prime Minister, ex-human rights lawyer, Keir Starmer, remember him. He was never going to tear up the ECHR because he's an ex-lawyer and he's woke, and all his friends in North London are. So they'll never tear up the ECHR, and the reason why is because the attack line is Britain becomes a global pariah. There are just a couple of countries that we'd be sort of lumped in with, and it would include Russia and it would include Belarus. Well, I'm going to be honest with you, and I'll level with you at 14 minutes past 1 in the afternoon. I don't care about our international reputation. You heard me right. I mean, if we've got a good international reputation, I'm very happy about that. We should have a good international reputation because we gave the world the Industrial Revolution, the concept of free open markets. We gave representative democracy. We ended slavery. We're pretty awesome. So I think that our international reputation is secure anyway. But we'll be a global pariah if we stop the boats because of all of the treaties that we would have to tear up. And yes, we would most likely have to break international law. I don't care. And what I would say to you is as follows. Do you think that Singapore or the United Arab Emirates or China care about international law? No. Because although those regimes, they're authoritarian, they're far from perfect, I don't want Britain to be like them, they have common sense when it comes to the basics, such as crime and border control. There's even the United States who demonstrated under Donald Trump that with the political will, you can pull the levers and you can stop illegal immigration. Let's take a listen to Nigel Farage laying out his plan to deploy the Navy to stop the boats if he becomes PM.
We are very confident that our policy of securely picking people up and safely taking them back to France, we are entirely confident that that falls within other conventions of international law. If the Royal Navy is not there to protect this country from invasion, then frankly, I can't see what its purpose is.
Well, that was Nigel Farage. Let me just give you a quick couple of stats before I bring in Charlie Rowley. 70,000 people have entered the country illegally since Labour won the last election. They were going to smash the gangs. 70,000 people. Now, the left will tell you that's a trivial amount. It's tiny compared to legal net migration. It's not. It's a vast number. You have the small East Sussex town of Crowborough, who have lost a local facility, which is an army cadet centre, which was used by young people for fitness and life development, all the rest of it. They've lost that. It's no longer a public municipal resource. 500 illegal immigrants accommodated in Crowborough, a lovely, leafy East Sussex town. Those people now, you know, the kids can't walk to school anymore. Women can't come home late at night from the pub. It's been devastating for Crowborough, and they are fighting this migrant accommodation in their tiny town. Well, based upon Labour's record in office of 70,000 illegals since they won, that is 140 Crowboroughs across the country. And that is just the people that have come since 2024. There are many more who are still here, a legacy of 10 years of failure. So here's what I'm going to say as I wrap this up. I don't care who ends illegal immigration. I don't care. I don't care if it's Kemi, if it's Nigel, if it's Rupert from his executive office chair in his house. I don't care if it's Andy Burnham. But whoever it is, the politician that stops the boats, let me tell you, there will be no stopping them. 1:17, live in the studio, Charlie Rowley, broadcaster and talk star. Hello, sir.
Good afternoon. Good to see you.
It would be very complicated to deploy the Navy. And in fact, unilateral efforts to stop the boats are probably going to break international law and will require the shredding of multiple treaties. It's going to involve unpicking the legal and constitutional framework of the United Kingdom. I'm not saying it's going to be easy, but I believe it's critically important that it happens. What's your view?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. Just in the figures that you were talking about a second ago, you know, the thousands of people that have come over into the UK illegally, that have crossed the channel in those small boats crossings, there needs a deterrent. And whether or not we can get into the, you know, the detail and which would need to go into if you're sort of going to then use the Navy to, you know, tug back those boats or then sort of, you know, take those people back to France and whether that violates international law, maritime law, whether the French would be very happy about it or not. I think that's all something that does need to be looked into. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's probably better to have an agreement with France.
I agree. I'm pricing it in that it will be an almighty dumpster fire if we do try to stop the boats. But I believe that we need the political will to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like people said, and OK, these people might, well, they would be right. If the amount of people that came across the channel who might have been previously deported to Rwanda, for example, Rwanda might not have been able to host up to, you know, 70, hundreds of thousands of people.
And that was never the plan for Rwanda.
But that was never the plan, you're right, because it's part of it is a deterrent which stops a number of those people coming across in the first place. So my personal view, I mean, I would never have got rid of Rwanda. In fact, I would have preferred back then if Rishi Sunak or Boris Johnson or even Liz Truss within her short tenure, if the plan was around then, just to sort of issue the flight to get off the ground. A unilateral agreement had been agreed between the UK, independent sovereign nation, and another independent sovereign nation, that's Rwanda. Those flights should have got off. You know, the Prime Minister should have sat, you know, with lawyers, whoever surrounding him, you know, and said, OK, I heed all the advice. I know, you know, there might be human rights issues or, you know, the ECHR might come into play if that flight takes off because there are people that are pleading actually the right to a family life. I'll take the hit. You know what? Sue me. Take me to court afterwards. But that flight is getting off the tarmac and it's going to Rwanda because that is our policy. That is the way in which we deter thousands of other people making that small boat crossing in the first place. So I think if you go back to a Rwanda scheme, now people might be tearing their hair out thinking, no, that costs far too much and they don't want to do that. OK, but let's look at alternatives then. How do you get another deterrent in place? What really challenges somebody to think, I'm not going to actually, you know, pay money to that criminal gang to get on a boat? It might be because I'm intercepted by the Navy. It doesn't necessarily mean that the Navy will have to, you know, go as far as what maybe Reform is saying because we haven't got those agreements with the French or, you know, the international community might, you know, completely sort of, you know, lambast us as the UK and our standing in the world might fall, which we don't want to lose. But a deterrent along the sea of some kind in military form, I don't think is something that many people would object to.
Well, I think unilateral efforts to stop the boats will be diplomatically difficult for the United Kingdom, legally, financially as well. What you're probably looking at is a response from the French, possibly a trade war, although that would be in our favour as there is a deficit in our trading relationship with France. So fine, we'll stop buying champagne. Stick that in your pipe and smoke it. But I'm not offering these black and white simple solutions. But I think what we saw in the United States is the potent force of political will when a decision's been made and when you've got a leader that has permission and more than that, a mandate from the public to do something. And therefore, I mean, the late, great Anne Widdecombe, our dear friend, she joined me a few months ago and she said, look, it's not going to be one thing that stops the boats. So you mentioned Rwanda, so you can bring Rwanda in. You scrap the Human Rights Act, which is a horrible law signed up to, created by Tony Blair. Then you look again at the Refugee Convention, which is not fit for the modern world, and the ECHR, and it's all these different things together, and then the Navy, and away you go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And making absolutely clear that if you do come into this country illegally, you don't actually get all the benefits that people are seeing the benefits of others getting, like being housed in a hotel or housed in an accommodation where you're, allowed, potentially up to £50, I think it is, a week, where you can then get sort of healthcare treatment, where you can go and see a dentist or a doctor above the queues of everyone else in this country. All of that has to stop.
Right. You're so right. And listen, I'm not going to demonise these lads, because you and I would do the same thing, right? These boys in the boats, good luck to them, right? They are human beings, right? They're not all blinking terrorists, are they? Some of them are just trying to have a better life. And I will never demonise these lads. The whole point is that what we've done is we're so exposed. We've got this open goal, and that is not their fault.
Yep.
And more power to them for exploiting it. So my point is not to demonise these lads, but not to present them with this opportunity.
Well, they are economic migrants. You're absolutely right. Then but they're not all refugees. They're not fleeing persecution. They're not all in countries where they are going to be harmed in any way. They want to come to the UK specifically, making that crossing, which is a dangerous crossing. There's no doubt about that, from France into the UK, because we have a more generous system than what they could have in France. France is a safe country. If you are a genuine refugee, if you are fleeing a war-torn nation, if you're from Eritrea, if you're from Afghanistan, if you're from Iran, some of the top 3 countries where people are coming from, then you would settle somewhere in Europe. You would settle in the nearest country that is actually able to support you and provide you that refuge. It's not about coming into the UK. The reason why people want to come to the UK is because of the generous system that we have, far too generous system that we have in this country, and people know if they come across in the Channel and they're not able to say what country they're from, who their name is, what age they are, then they will be here for maybe a year or 2, then put up in accommodation, they will be funded by a UK taxpayer. That is a life that is appealing to someone that, as you say, is an economic migrant. But every economic migrant that comes across and uses those benefits and takes the British taxpayer and the British citizen for a ride, in that sense, you are denying actually someone that might actually be genuinely in need.
A mega dinghy is on fire in the Channel as we speak. We'll bring you the latest on that next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
1:27, you are listening to Talk. Anthony has said good afternoon, Mark, and good afternoon, Charlie. The Spanish use ships whilst our lame rollover left-wing government use incentives. Make it make sense. Graham, the release early scheme is a political choice. So it is a political choice to allow anyone out of jail early, including those who commit manslaughter. It's not a matter of law. It is a political choice. Graham, thank you for that. We'll come to the early release scheme in just a moment. That is an unexploded bomb that this government are going to have to deal with. And by the way, fair's fair. I'm not going to attack Labour over this. I am not. I'm going to attack the Tories because they did not build enough prisons whilst they were in power. That is definitely a problem that Labour have inherited. When it comes to the economy, Labour have made it way worse. But when it comes to this prison crisis, it is a crisis of the Tories making. In my opinion, Amanda in London, Mark, suggestions for illegal immigrant returns. Feels like banging your head against a brick wall. They do not want to do it. They do not want to stop the boats. Amanda, I think you're right. Richard in Ayrshire says, Mark, please start your petition giving the government our permission, our authority to break international law to stop the boats and to deploy the Navy. Sarah, why don't the French understand that if the migrants' route to the UK is blocked by them, something they're paid to do by us, there would be less of them making their way to France to get across. It's in their interest too. It is so frustrating. And Mark in Essex, pretty strong language from Mark. I would chop an arm off and sign in blood your petition to stop the boats. Mark, please don't do that. Sharon as well, Mark, from Sharon here. I would sign anything to stop these illegals. I also got 2 kisses from Sharon. So God bless you for that. Either that or you're swearing, but I don't think so. Sharon, thank you for that. Live in the studio. Charlie Rowley. We need to talk about France because many would argue we'll never stop the boats without the help of the French. Well, things are changing politically in France. And if the outcome of the presidential elections next year is heading in a rightward direction, maybe we've got less of a problem.
I think that could absolutely be true because, you know, the whole point of what, as far as I can see it at the minute from France, is that France allows, obviously, people to get to Dover and then obviously cross the Channel. And the only thing that I mean, France stop. I mean, there was a stat I think somebody tried to, or it was put out the other day that 40% of crossings are down or something, or the French have been able to stop about 46,000 people. But that's about 30%. That is not enough. The French are not, to stop 30% of people attempting that small boat crossing is not enough for the amount of money that we're paying. And the only time I've actually seen the French, it seems to me, do something is when Emmanuel Macron was about to have a visit to the UK and their version of border force obviously went down to the beaches and actually did start slashing some of the dinghies to prevent them taking off. But that was a complete PR stunt. I haven't seen any evidence since that the French are actually happy to try and stop those boats. But they allow people, I think, to come to France to then just get on into the UK. If you did have a change in leadership in France, then it might be actually that you stop people coming in from right across Europe before they even get into France, or from North Africa into France before they make their way across France to Calais. So I think there will be a real toughening up in France. Of course, if it's Marine Le Pen, she has her own issues with the European Union, the issue of freedom of movement, the Schengen area and all the rest of it. Things could change for the better.
Most definitely. What about Nigel and Rupert? The doomed love story. Of course we know. And I was on air on Sunday morning when Rupert Lowe released a video offering an olive branch to the leader of Reform UK, Nigel Farage. We then got a bit of a word salad from Nigel, which was a lot of words not saying too much, like a holding pattern. And then the suggestion that actually Mr Farage is open to some kind of agreement, some kind of conversation, then a war of words online. I mean, what is the latest?
Well, look, I mean, well, it's hard to say. You never know what the latest is.
It's tempestuous, isn't it, between the two of them?
Exactly. And look, they've obviously had a spectacular falling out. And, Rupert obviously then went off to do his own thing. He set up Restore Britain. And Restore Britain, they haven't done... I as well as actually, I think, the hype that has been around them. They were a new force, and therefore there was a bit of interest around that. They did better than the Conservatives at the Manchester mayoral election. So, but then you've got to ask yourself, well, the Tories have never really done very well in Manchester in those constituencies anyway. And there was a particular issue that Restore Britain have focused on, much like Reform, which is over the rape gang scandal which has taken place in around Greater Manchester. So it would have done well in certain areas, but it is not going to be enough to win a general election. That is for the birds, and I think Rupert now understands that. But he's had his project after falling out with Nigel. I was fascinated by the conditions that he set originally, which was to sort of say the UK must hold a referendum on the death penalty. It must get rid of Reform, must get rid of failed former Tories, but yet no mention of Zia Youssef, who was the man that called the police on him, which is all part of their spectacular falling out. So, I mean, look, they're two big beasts of blokes, right? They are businessmen. They are very good orators. I do like the way Rupert speaks in Parliament. He challenges the civil service, but the people around Restore are clearly not with what mainstream Britain, I think, would want to see. And I don't say that mainstream Britain as if tagging to the centre. I just think they are ideologically wrong in some of the ethno-nationalist sort of approaches that they take compared to where modern and the majority of Britain is. And in order to win an election, you have to bring a majority with you. You have to be united as a party and as a front. So there's an offer there. But Rupert, frankly, isn't in a position to start calling the shots. He's still the minority party. He's leading a minority party in the UK compared to Reform that is dipping and has dipped in the polls somewhat over the last month, but is still up there, is second and still first in some polls. So, I think what people will slowly start to realise that whatever your personality, whatever your personal difference is, the public don't like public spats either. So you've got to put all of that to one side and be a professional politician and be, even if you can't stand each other behind the scenes, you've got to put on a united front, for the electorate, for the voters. And I think everybody at some stage on the right is going to have to realise, look, whether there are pacts, whether there are agreements, which I'm not sure that will be the case before a general election for all centre-right, right-wing parties, but there has to be a sort of unwritten and unspoken rule that we're not going to attack each other. OK, we're different parties. We're a Conservative Party, we're Reform, we're Restore. But who is our real opposition here? It is the Labour Party. If you want to get Labour out of office, we've got to stop having pot shots at each other and focus all of our attention on Burnham's Britain, how that's going to just result in more taxes, more borrowing, more spending and more debt. And if they can do that and hold that sort of coalition, whether it's unspoken or not, as a right-wing force and uniting the right, as it were, then that might be hope for the country in getting rid of Labour.
My enemy's enemy is my friend. And I think that when it comes to the next election, facing the threat of a left-wing coalition, a rainbow coalition made up of Labour, the SNP, potentially the Lib Dems, and maybe some Green candidates, also some independents, then I think that will focus minds, and I think you'll see an outbreaking of affection between Rupert, Kemi and Nigel. It's going to be a right-wing love-in. It's always a love-in when you're on, Charlie. Great to have you on. A couple of seconds. Andy Burnham, were you surprised he's on holiday?
I was, yes.
After 2 weeks?
After 2 weeks, yes.
Are you having that or not?
No, I'm not. I would have thought he'd want to spend the summer where he's got no media, no Parliament sitting, no scrutiny. I would have thought he'd be, wanting to do more, but he's put his feet up for a couple of weeks.
Well, please never take a holiday because you're critical to Talk. Not only a regular contributor, now a Talk star as well.
I think that's very kind.
Owning it on the airwaves. Much more to come. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Should we deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? That is today's question. We've got a full switchboard. I'll get to your calls in just a few minutes. Delighted to welcome writer and academic Andrew Tettenborn, who's written an explosive piece in this week's Spectator magazine. And it's interesting because the headline is as follows: the big hole in Reform's naval migration plan. Hello, Andrew.
Good afternoon, Mark.
Thank you so much for joining us. What are the problems facing a future Reform government if they want to deploy the Navy to stop the boats?
Well, I think they're very much practical problems. They're not a problem of principle. I don't think we need to share a great deal of sympathy with people who essentially put themselves in danger on the high sea with a view to exerting a little bit of gentle blackmail on the British government later. I think the practicalities come in actually using the Navy. One point is, I'm not actually sure that we have the ships. It's said, well, we could use some of the River class, we could use some of our landing craft. I'm not sure how well suited those vessels are. Landing craft are for landing people who want to go ashore, not for pushing people out who don't want to go ashore. And frankly, most of the warships we have simply aren't built for the purpose of acting as glorified prison transports. So there is a practicality point. There's also, I think, another much more human point about it. The Navy will not be happy about this. Now, OK, our services are normally prepared to knuckle under and do as they're asked by government. That's one of the most fantastic features of them. But I think the Navy would be very sceptical were they to be told by a Reform government do it. Obviously, in the end, they'd have to do it. What you might very well find is very large numbers of resignations among the naval top brass. Now, that's the last thing we need. A good naval top brass is what we have for the purpose of good staff work, of good planning, and all the things behind the scenes when it comes to armed services. We live in a dangerous world. The last thing we want to do is end up with a demoralized naval top brass in a situation like this. There are also other practical problems. For example, a ship of ours arrives off the French coast, and we say to the people in it, right, guys, off you get. They sit down and refuse. It won't look good on CNN to have naval officers essentially throwing such people even into shallow water and saying, right, now you wade ashore. And I'm afraid we do have to think of the optics. We live in a goldfish bowl world. We will be watched, and we want to do our best to preserve what reputation we have.
But why is our international reputation so important, Andrew, given the enormous security, financial and societal costs of illegal immigration? Surely the problem of the boats trumps any issues around our public standing globally.
I think probably if we could find a way of landing fairly large numbers of unwilling people back on the French coast where they came from, then I think we should do it. But no nation can afford, even I think when it comes to the enormous imperative to stop the boats, no nation can afford to become known as the nation that is prepared to push people into the sea, possibly to their deaths. You have a couple of children killed when being pushed out of one of these boats. And I'm afraid I think we probably would have to think again.
Well, I did have this conversation with Richard Tice yesterday, Andrew. and he, of course, is the deputy leader of Reform UK. And I said that actually, if the Royal Navy intercept some of these vessels, well, they're not seaworthy, many of them. People will die. He denied that and said, well, the Navy are already intercepting these vessels and taking them here. But it's hard to imagine that a vast Royal Navy ship that intercepts a dinghy isn't going to be hazardous.
I think it is right, because the point is there's an enormous difference between accompanying a dinghy here when, broadly speaking, the people on board the dinghy want to come here, and forcibly moving a dinghy in a direction that its inhabitants don't want to move in. Now, if we could develop some kind of vessel which could, for example, grapple and tow a dinghy of that sort and offer the people on it perhaps space on another dinghy to transfer to if it sank, possibly that might be a way forward. But certainly the idea of simply sending in the Navy forcibly to send back boats full of unarmed civilians, I think, is a non-starter.
Andrew, just briefly, Andrew, before you come to that point, is it not their job? They are the Navy.
It is, but the trouble is there are jobs which can be done and jobs which perhaps are not best suited to the Navy. Oddly enough, I would rather prefer it were the job to be entrusted to a beefed-up border force rather than to the elite forces of this country, if I had the choice.
And Andrew, what is your considered solution for this issue around illegal immigration? It is intolerable to the majority of voters, and it's probably intolerable to the vast majority of the people watching and listening to this show at the moment who have had enough.
Yes, I wish I had one. I must admit, I would like a way forcibly to return, but I think we also have to make it less attractive to come here. One problem is that if you come here, essentially you can get lost. We have, for example, power to fingerprint every single person suspected of coming into this country on one of the boats. We don't do it. We should make it absolutely clear. Come in on a boat, you get rounded up, you get fingerprinted, and we find out who you are, and then at least we can keep some sort of tabs on you.
Is it also not mind-boggling to you, Andrew? Is it not mind-boggling to you that people enter the country illegally and they have freedom? Because I cannot process that.
I find it difficult, I must admit. I see no reason why we should not have quite severe restrictions, actually, on people who come to this country without the right of abode in it. Unfortunately, we do have a long tradition, of course, of not interfering with people here. I think that may very well have gently to change.
Andrew, a real pleasure to have you on the show, and congratulations on a brilliant piece in The Spectator. I can highly recommend it. Andrew Tettenborn is a writer, academic and contributor to The Spectator. And in today's issue, this week's issue, the headline of his article, The Big Hole in Reform's Naval Migration Plan. Well, I tend to agree with my dear late friend Anne Widdecombe, who told me on this show just a few months ago that the way to handle illegal immigration is going to involve a multitude of policies, and there's a role for the Navy. There's a role for tearing up the ECHR, Human Rights Act, Refugee Convention. There's a role for getting France to do more. And that's what we've got to do, because it's a non-starter. What do you think, folks? It's your calls next. Should we deploy the Navy to stop the boats?
across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Should we deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? I've just spoken to a brilliant journalist and academic who said it's riven with technical and ethical and legal problems. Well, John says, Mark, bring on the resignations of the Navy top brass that are unwilling to do their duty and stop the boats. They are not the kind of people we want in the Royal Navy. We must stop the Islamic invasion of Britain. Alison in Glasgow. Mark, the French are wholly responsible for any deaths in the Channel. They're allowing the boats to leave their beaches. So according to your guest, if a foreign power was sending young men to this country with possible dangerous intentions, our Navy can't stop it. Well, then that sounds ridiculous. Let's take a voice note from Bob. It's a short one.
I think you're right about the logistics in the Royal Navy. The safest way is arrest, detain, deport. Cheers, Mark.
Well, I disagree. I fully agree with you, Bob. Every syllable of that. It doesn't take long to explain what we need to do, does it? David is in Hampshire. Hello, David.
Hello, Mark. Yeah, that gentleman just hit everything on the head with a hammer, I think. That's absolutely right. The three words. There's no political will, which I think you said earlier, just after I phoned in. There's no political will this end. What I'm just looking at is the fact that, or thinking about, was the fact that the ECHR, now you look at that and you think, well, that's there to protect migrants, etc., and you know, the fleeing from tyranny and God knows what else, whatever that is. But I would have thought perhaps health and safety would have come into that. And why is it that they're letting them go from the beaches? Your last guest speaker, I think, mentioned it. Under health and safety, shouldn't they be stopping them from boarding these unstable rubber things, lilos?
Well, you're completely right about that, because in France, they have very strict health and safety laws. There's actually a crazy amount of red tape in the French workplace, which is why their economy is so slow. It's so bureaucratic. There are so many rules. And yet the authorities in France will let people get into an inflatable dinghy. You couldn't make it up. It makes no sense whatsoever, David.
It doesn't. I mean, you know, that's where it starts when you're quoting ECHR. You've just said about their French human rights law. You shouldn't be letting these people, especially young children, who are being thrown over on board or thrown off just to get... I mean, it's just... They should be stopping it under health and safety reasons, surely.
I think you're right. I mean, none of it makes any sense. It defies logic, David. I cannot understand why we're not able to police our borders, even though we successfully prevailed over Germany in 2 world wars. And I cannot understand, David, why when these people arrive here, they're not arrested and locked up. They've broken the law. We don't know who they are. The idea that they're not detained is mind-boggling, but it goes further, doesn't it? We give them money, they stay in a hotel, they have a mobile phone, they get a GP appointment, which you and I, of course, will have to wait weeks for. And now we've got the spectre of the homes of multiple occupancy, which, David, are arguably even worse than the hotels.
Yeah, and it's taxpayers' money. It's my taxpayers' money that I have had to contribute for a lot of years, a heck of a lot of years. And there's no political will. When you look at them coming out of Downing Street now, they seem to be like peacocks pruning their feathers, and they've got to have that red portfolio. Have you noticed that?
Yeah, they love that. Well, it's all about the optics, isn't it?
Yeah, it's more so this government, this lot, this bunch of amateurs, childish amateurs, they're giving themselves away. And I don't want to go into sexist or anything like that.
Go on, David. No one gets cancelled on my watch. If you think it, let's put it on the radio. Let's have it out, David. Better out than in.
Some of these lady ones, they look ridiculous in what they're wearing.
You're entitled to that view.
I'm sorry, but, you know, that's just my view, and I'm not a fashion expert, believe me.
But what you're
there you
talking
go.
about is both male and female ministers should be dressed appropriately for a
Yes.
public job.
Yes, yes. And put the portfolio away. You don't need that. You don't need that. Just put it in the car, put it in your briefcase, and go and do your job properly.
David, brilliant call. Really enjoyed your company today. Let's speak again soon. No one gets cancelled, not on my watch. If you think it, we'll put it on the radio, we'll put it on the telly. Because there is no opinion that's unacceptable. Derek's in Manchester. He's full of opinions. How are you, sir?
I'm fine.
Most of them very high value. I've got to be honest with you. Right, what are we going to do? Your job is to stop the boats. Derek, I've just had a guest on, and he said if you intercept these vessels, people will die. That is a problem, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, right. Well, I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll hire a. Hang on a minute. I've got a whistling in me. There you go.
What's happened?
Right. I'll tell you what we'll do.
We're
We'll
a train
hire
station.
a private company
Mm-hmm.
with an old-style hovercraft, some of them that we retired,
Oh, yeah.
an old-style hovercraft. And the moment these dinghies are seen on the French side, we pick them up, we put them on the hovercraft, and we drop them straight back on France's beaches.
What a lovely idea.
We know where the beaches that they've come from are, because we can use a drone to check where they're setting off from. And we drop them straight back on the beach. And if France wants to complain about that, or we just and start spouting international law, why don't we just say, well, hang on a minute, what about the international law that you allowed them to get on a dinghy without a passport, without leaving your country without a passport? You secure your borders and we'll secure ours. Simple.
Well,
Really,
I think
it's so simple.
that's not a bad idea, and I would definitely look at commissioning hovercrafts. Also, why can't we just...
I'll buy myself a hovercraft.
Well, I know, it's a nice way to travel, and we can get them back to...
The only trouble is these lefties will not give me the contract.
No, of course, no, they won't, of course. No, but I mean, I don't know why the Navy can't hire vessels to do this job. And Derek, there's going to be a lot of different factors that you're going to have to do: the ECHR, the Human Rights Act, Refugee Convention, Navy, Rwanda. You know, there's about 5 or 6 things that need to happen all concurrently.
Which we should have been out of a long time ago.
Well, I know. And then this is why people are furious with the Tories about that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Derek, here's a question for you, the million-dollar question, because I know that you're more restore than reform, but...
Oh, yeah.
You can be honest with me. Restore are not going to win the election, right? They may influence a future reform government. Maybe they'll have some MPs, etc. But will we, hand on heart, Desla, are we ever going to stop the boats?
I sincerely hope so, because if we don't, the country's finished. I'm really sorry, but the country is finished. And the top, and as you said about there, when you just said restore, so they're actually running the narrative, because at the end of the day, you wouldn't have heard Farage mention the Royal Navy unless it had been for the...
You're right about... Derek, I agree with you. You're right about that. And also, reform did not go there on deportations a year and a half ago.
No, absolutely
An
not,
interview with Steve Edgington, a good friend of mine, at a rival network, and Farage said that's politically impossible, it's never going to happen. Well, a year later, it's detain and deport.
All of a sudden it's the same. Yeah, because at the end of the day, he knows for a fact that Rupert Lowe is quite right on what he's saying on most stuff. Some of it you've got to say is a little bit too over the top. But by the same rule, I really do think that we've been that many years with people going the opposite way. We need someone a little bit over the top at this moment in time, just to save the country.
Derek, you're never over the top. Great call. Keep them coming. Have a nice afternoon, young man in Manchester. You must be missing Andy Burnham. It must be so awful in Manchester now without Andy Burnham, because he was the king of the North. I feel so sorry for the North. Are you guys struggling without the king? Must be awful, mustn't it? Has the economy gone down? Is crime up? Because it was just like the Yellow Brick Road, wasn't it, when he was in charge? Luckily, he's doing it for the whole country now, and I've got to say, I've never felt better. What a shame he's on holiday. Folks, so much more to get through. Our conversation this afternoon is a simple one. Should we deploy the Navy to stop the boats? A big hour to come. Don't go anywhere.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. It is Mark Dolan in for the brilliant Ian Collins all of this week. Let me bring you up to speed on the schedule. So Monday through Friday, as the Americans say, I'll be here 1 till 4. Lovely to have your company. Enjoy being on in the afternoon. Looking out the window, there's a sunny haze over the capital. Great to have you with me. And then Saturday and Sunday, I've got breakfast. Yes, indeed, from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. Sunday is my last day for a couple of weeks. I'm off on holiday. And I'm going to take a fortnight. You're welcome. A bit like the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. What on earth is going on? If you get the biggest job in the country, which is Prime Minister, do you then drop everything and head off to Alicante or Tenerife? What do you think about that? Does Andy Burnham deserve a holiday? Are you surprised that he's downed tools after just 2 weeks in office? And breaking this afternoon, a mega dinghy is on fire in the Channel with 157 undocumented migrants on board. Another day, another reminder of the scale of this crisis following, of course, shocking scenes in that Spanish enclave of Ceuta just a week ago. Well, the Spanish used ships to tackle the problem and return many of these men. So my question to you this afternoon is a simple one. We all pay our taxes to have a military. So is it time to deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? I mean, be clear, it'll be controversial, it'll be very hazardous, it will be a legal nightmare, we will become an international pariah. But is it the right thing to do? Should we deploy the Navy to stop the boats? Should that be a weapon in our arsenal? There is no magic bullet, is there? ECHR, Human Rights Act, Refugee Convention, Rwanda 2.0. But what about the Navy? Should they have a role? If not, what exactly are they there for? So my phone number is 03444991000. I've got the dream team today. Luke is directing our TV output. And I've got to tell you, I've never looked better. He knows he's got my best side. So if you want to see the show, head over to YouTube, search Talking Up with Poppin and waving my arms, and I'm wearing a very controversial tie which divides opinion. Finley's in charge, Amy's pressing the buttons, and Faith is taking your calls. 03444991000, text the word talk in your message to 87222, leave us a voice note, and as the saying goes, let's talk. Oh, that music stopped at exactly the right time. Amy, this show is not just thrown together, is it? Proof that it's not thrown together is that we have the most amazing guests on this show, and it doesn't get much better than the Director of Popular Conservatism, Mark Littlewood. Mark, welcome to the show.
Good to be with you, Mark.
Really good to have you. Now, Mark, we've got lots of stories to get through, and I really need your brain across a number of them. Can we talk about this strange public romance/doomed love affair that's playing out between Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage? Now, you're on record as saying that Kemi, Nigel and Rupert largely agree on most things politically. So how do you see this particular efforts at a reconciliation playing out?
Well, at first blush, Mark, I welcome it, because you're going to have to find some sort of way under some sort of banner, and I think the Conservatives and the Reform are each hoping it will be their own singular banner rather than any kind of electoral arrangement, but you need one united banner in order to maximise your chances of winning an election. So if Rupert Lowe has reached the conclusion, and I don't try to diminish him or his supporters for this, they've done quite an impressive job to launch a party and get it to a few percent of the vote, but if he's reached the conclusion that he has absolutely no prospect of winning the election himself, and I think that would be the only conclusion you could draw, then seeking some sort of rapprochement or peace deal with Reform and possibly others seems like a smart thing. So I start by saying very welcome. But then a very odd way indeed of delivering it, that if you're trying to negotiate and build bridges, I think it's far better to start by listing the things that you broadly agree on. You then possibly put in a couple of riders. You know, let's be honest, we don't wholly agree on X, we're not fully aligned on Y. But in fact, what Rupert Lowe did, if you like, without warning, just suddenly popped up on social media, so catching people a little off guard, was to start by saying, here are the absolute red lines. If you're not willing to adopt all 5 of these to the last dotted I and crossed T, no darts. And I think that makes it very difficult to move the ball forward. Far better to start with that, where the overlap is, rather than listing a couple of things where...
Well, I'm really glad that you identified that, Mark, and I think that proves that this overture from Rupert is strategic, it's political, and it's a bear trap. I don't think this offer, it's just my personal view, Mark, and I could be wrong, but I don't think it was made in good faith, because if one of the deal breakers is there can be no ex-Tories in a Reform government, well, that ain't going to happen, is it? Good luck with that, because Reform's Shadow Chancellor is one Robert Jenrick.
Yes, and of course their education spokesman is Suella Braverman, and I don't know where it would leave Danny Kruger, who's the MP who's preparing them for government.
And exactly, he's the mastermind of the whole Reform project, Danny Kruger, isn't he?
Exactly, yeah. He's the brains putting together what they'd need to do in government. So that seems to me an odd one. Whereas if Rupert Lowe had said, look, there might be some differences between us on how we deal with ex-Tories and which ex-Tories we trust and what the sort of Cub Scouts honour that any ex-Tory would have to go through in order to be fully believed that they'd seen the error of their ways, that would make some sense. But what's intriguing now is, you know, how should Nigel Farage respond? I mean, it's interesting that Lowe has made this offer just to Farage, not to Kemi Badenoch, with whom he seems to have a better working relationship than he does, because Farage and Lowe have obviously been daggers drawn. But look, I think Farage has acted in a gentlemanly fashion. He sort of issued a suitably vague statement. But Reform have presumably calculated, this would be the smart thing to do, that they are still quite a long way shy of looking likely to win the next general election. They're in a strong position, but they're probably at least 5%, possibly 10% or more short. So they need to hoover up the people who are presently tempted by Restore as a starting point. So if I was Farage, I'd say, look, let's not start with your red lines. If we both draw red lines, we're going to get nowhere. Let's meet and see if on 2 or 3 issues we find ourselves in agreement, and then try and rebuild a working relationship. Everybody, Mark, gets extremely excited about electoral pacts and, you know, who might stand down in a particular seat and whether that's robbing the electorate of choice. I think that relations on the right of politics are now so poisonous that actually the first move just needs to be to extract the poison, to actually have an agreement that you won't just throw insults at each other, that you'll try to keep your disagreements private, especially if they're personal. You might still be running candidates against each other, but put yourself in a situation in which a future working relationship of some sort or another is possible, rather than dragging each other through the gutter and potentially suing each other through the courts. If that first bit could be put right, who knows where that leads? So I think that would be my rather modest hope, that the Conservatives, Reform and Restore could get to that position, even if political disagreement and electoral competition persists between the three of them. That would be some kind of start, rather than using all their political capital to tear each other's hair out.
Well, Mark, you're coming from a good place, because you just want to save Britain. You want an economy that lives within its means, a sensible, workable environmental policy. You want border control. None of these things are controversial. And you're the director of popular conservatism, and I think a majority of voters would share those objectives. So it's all to play for. The problem you have on the right is that whilst each of the individual parties are actually in quite a strong position, Reform remain a formidable voice and are ahead of the Tories and Restore. But then you've got Restore, who enjoy growing support, as we saw in Greater Manchester. And then you've got the Tories, who are rehabilitating themselves under Kemi Badenoch. So individually, they're all doing very well, but they're cancelling each other out. The political right in this country is in rude health, but it's fragmented.
Yes, that's exactly the electoral problem, Mark. And the first past the post electoral system is unforgiving of those sort of arrangements. OK, that doesn't necessarily mean that you have some stitched up arrangement in a smoke-filled room in which you allocate seats to one party or another. But it does mean that you need to have some sort of close understanding. If you were to look at the parties on the left, for example, what we know, I think with a nudge and a wink between party activists in different parties on the left, but also a rather developed pattern of behaviour amongst left-wing voters, is they are very willing to vote tactically. If you are a Labour voter in a seat where the Lib Dems are very obviously the challengers to the Conservatives, they switch to the Lib Dems in swathes, whereas the Liberal Democrat vote will collapse to virtually nothing if you're in a situation where it looks like, say, Labour are holding the banner. And then there are a smattering of seats where it looks like the Greens are the best option to, say, beat the Tories. So left-wing voters, although they will still have an array of parties on the ballot paper, have got much more used to who's in pole position here, whereas right-wing voters have not picked up that habit whatsoever. So you have the real danger if we continue along these tracks and if the present opinion poll numbers stick, that at the next election, which I still think will be in 2029, but could be just a few months away if Andy Burnham decides to show a bit of courage and go for a mandate, that you could see the right of centre parties getting 50% of the vote between them. Yeah. And bear in mind, with 35, 40%, you can win a landslide. But if Reform and the Conservatives split it down the middle and Restore pick up another, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5%, you will not return that into seats. So that is the bit that needs to be patched together. First, people need to be relaxed about their voters switching to another party if it's in seats in which that their particular first preference party is in a hopeless situation. Decades of that has happened on the left, none of it on the right, quite the opposite.
Mark, what does a united right look like, and what is the timeline? Is it necessary that this happens before the election? Because my worry is that if they hope to unite after the election in the context of a hung parliament, at that point it could be too late.
Yes, that is the great dilemma. I strongly suspect that if the election did throw up a result in which there was a hung parliament and the Conservatives and Reform and possibly Rupert Lowe as a Restore MP could form a majority between them, they would indeed do so. But the problem is you may well not get to that position because you've split the vote and, Labour have therefore won more seats than they otherwise would have done. The starting position is this, Mark, is I would like to find those areas, and you listed some of them very kindly that my organisation Popular Conservatism stands for, that we can agree on. So don't Kemi, Nigel and Rupert all agree on abandoning carbon net zero? Yes. Don't they all agree that we need to leave ECHR? Yes. Do they all agree that we should repeal the Human Rights Act? I think pretty much so. And probably the Equality Act. Might be a little bit of difference there, but most think it's gone too far. Well, if you could see these parties cooperating on those clarion calls, on those big campaigning points, and in 6 or 12 months' time, you got to a position in which there would still be differences, certainly differences of emphasis, and probably some differences on some, if you like, lower salience policies. But if you had a 6, 8, possibly even 10-point plan that all of those three parties believed was a necessity to save Britain, then I think that a kind of electoral success could follow from that. So position one, starting point, first thing you've got to do, stop being rude about each other. Second thing you've got to do is to explore the areas in which you are basically aligned and turn a blind eye at the moment to those areas in which you disagree. And if you can get those first two done by the end of the year, then I would hope that 2027 could see much more coordination, alignment and a friendliness and camaraderie sort of status on the right, rather than us just tearing lumps out of each other, because that's a one-way route either to a re-elected Labour government or, worse still, a leftist rainbow coalition which will do untold damage to the country. So at some point, if people are serious that we've got to put country before party and put petty jealousies aside and save Britain, they actually need to do it, not just say it.
Thank you, Mark. Mark Littlewood is the Director of Popular Conservatism. Should we deploy the Navy to stop the boats? Guy is in Hampshire. Hello, Guy.
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Now, you've got some proper expertise in this area.
Yeah, I'm a naval officer, and to be honest with you, if I was ordered to do this, I'd probably refuse to do it based on the fact that it would be potentially an illegal order. Now, there's a couple of reasons behind that. we've got the wrong types of ships. You know, if you want me to send off £1 billion warship to go and stick it alongside a rubber dinghy, I can't remember who said it, but it was brilliant. It said it was similar to getting a Challenger tank to go down the high street to look after parking.
Well, if it gets anywhere near the dinghy, it will sink the dinghy just because of its sheer scale, right?
Absolutely. And, you know, that moves on to the second thing. If I'm trying to manoeuvre alongside, in a flat calm, potentially, but the Channel's very rarely a flat calm. So if I go alongside a dinghy to try and nudge it round, turn it round, and all the rest of it, I'm going to kill someone, potentially, either accidentally or accidentally on purpose. By accidentally, what I mean there is, what do I do when someone gets up and jumps over the side in protest and I can't rescue them? What happens when I put my ship, that's the accidental bit. The accidentally on purpose is I put the ship alongside, the two craft roll together, and I crush someone to death. Now, this is why we're verging on the illegal order side of things, because you know, I don't want a whole host of human rights lawyers chasing me through the courts, aka Northern Ireland, for the rest of my life because I was following government orders.
That's interesting.
And, you know, it's the wrong ships. Now, I noticed on Reform's wonderful document, you know, on the front cover, I think they put HMS Ocean. We sold that to the Brazilians 6 years ago. They talk about taking the Batch 1 OPVs out and using them. They would be the correct ones, but by 2028, they will all have been sold off, which is before the next election. So what have we got left with? What vessels have we got? So we could have a load of Royal Marines in ribs. So you've got 5 Royal Marines, 6 Royal Marines or so in a rib coming up alongside a rubber dinghy full of 150 people. What do you think's going to happen? What's the answer to this? Someone talked about putting landing craft. They're not fast enough, probably, to catch up with the ribs that are coming across. And if they were, again, don't take 150 people, so you need 2 or 3 of them. And again, you're back to the same problem. Landing craft are not particularly manoeuvrable. So you then try and get that alongside without crushing someone jumping up over the side, etc.
And of course, the other issue you got, Guy, is that the criminal gangs that arrange these crossings will be quite happy for some people to die, because then there will be pressure not to police the boats anymore, which helps their business model. So if the Navy were to cause casualties, this would be weaponized by the gangs.
Oh God, yeah, and everybody else. I mean, you imagine what happened. I mean, if you go back to the Bryce Norton incident, you know, when Palestine Action entered, I could probably guarantee that someone was in someone's weapon sights when they broke in. But they wouldn't have opened fire, because can you imagine what you guys would have been talking about killing this poor innocent person?
Guy, are you sympathetic, though, to the feelings my viewers and listeners have that we've got the Navy there for a reason? If they can't police our borders, why have we got a Navy at all?
Because the Navy's job not necessarily is to police the borders. That's Border Force. The Navy's job is to protect the United Kingdom's sea lanes and lines of communication and convoys.
But if alien vessels are crossing those sea lanes, why is that not in their purview?
Because, as I said, it's the wrong types of ships for doing that particular job.
Can't we rent some ships?
Well, you could, but who? I mean, I'd be more sympathetic to, you know, commercially getting a private company to come and do this with the right types of ships, but it wouldn't be Navy. And again, you're back into the next thing of, right, so you've actually turned this boat around, or you've got people. Final point on that, actually. A warship is British sovereign territory. So as soon as you lift the people off the dinghy and stick them on the deck of a warship, they're in Britain. So that defeats the object of that exercise. Now, yeah, I agree. Something's got to be done, but I think it's a bit more down the line. It's reducing the pull factors. It's getting more cooperation from the French, because ultimately, you know, once you've got this white ensign vessel, whatever it happens to be, landing craft, hovercraft, I heard someone talking about, you know, and it then goes to France, you've now got an issue. What if they don't let you in? What if they, you know, how do you get alongside in Calais to drop them all off? Because they will be swarmed by French fishing vessels and not allowed anywhere near it. Plus, also, you've got the trade imbalance with France. You know, OK, we might stop buying their wine, but they give us a hell of a lot. Well, they don't give us, they sell us a hell of a lot of electricity. So what happens if they cut that off? You know, there are so many things here. And what strikes me is we did try this a couple of years ago. I think it was called Operation Isotope. Now, what the Navy can bring to the party would be command and control, and building that surface picture of who's where the targets, if you like, are to send people. That would be the role of the Navy, not sending White Ensign warships out there. You know, a £1 billion destroyer trying to get alongside a little rubber boat.
Well,
you know,
I said that to Richard Tice yesterday, that if you use the Navy to intercept these dinghies, people will die. He denied that. He said, you've not done your homework. They already do it. But I think there are big logistical problems. Guy, I do need to run. Just briefly, we need solutions, don't we? So I like the idea that at least the Royal Navy could have some kind of surveillance role, some sort of strategic role. How else do we stop the boats, briefly, if you can?
That's the $64 million.
I mean, is it not a question of human rights and ECHR that when these folk arrive in the UK, they are detained?
I would agree to a large extent, but what I'm sceptical about is thinking back to Brexit. You know, if we get out of the EU, all our problems will stop. They haven't. If we get out of the ECHR, all our problems will stop. They won't.
Well, there will be fewer court cases, there will be less legal action if we're out of the ECHR when we try to deport people. At the moment, it's impossible.
Some people are deported. Let's face it. Let's be charitable. Some people are, but I agree. The ones that make the headlines, the chicken nuggets, the right to the family life, all of that sort of stuff. You know, but they're fewer, or not necessarily fewer and far between. But you know, there are certain things that make the headlines, which you know, which are then wrapped up out of proportion or proportionality. I reckon. How do we stop the boats? It's a combination of things, and France, I'm afraid, is the sticky wicket on this one. We've really got to get them on board to do it. Now, that doesn't mean paying them more, but it's getting them, as people said, to police their borders better, accept people coming back, you know, deport and detain. Deport to where?
Well, look, Guy, I mean, that is, of course, an issue, France. They're going to have possibly quite a significant political change at the presidential elections next year. Maybe that offers a glimmer of hope. Guy, thank you for your considered thoughts. Should we deploy the Navy to stop the boats? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Janice has a great idea for illegal immigration. She's in Stoke-on-Trent. Mark, I think that quite a few of the illegals should be placed where all the elite MPs, etc. live, so they can find out just what it's like. I completely agree. Let's have migrant hotels and HMOs in Islington, North London, which is, of course, the epicentre of the chattering classes. Paul in York. Mark, I can understand how putting one of our rare-sighted Royal Navy ships would not be viable in this context. However, I thought we had a well-equipped and well-trained border force with vessels. What are they doing? I'll give my head a wobble. I know the answer. Paul, thank you for that. Let's take a call if we can. John is in Rotherham. John, good afternoon.
Hi, Mark. How are you?
I'm very well indeed. Nice to have you with me this afternoon. What do you think? There are lots of practical challenges in using the Navy, but should we think about deploying them as part of this assault on illegal immigration?
I don't think we've got any option now other than to do that, because the problem's not going away. It just seems to be getting worse. So if they can't sort it out by other means, then we've got no alternative, because the government's first priority is to protect the borders and protect the citizens of the the United Kingdom. And I don't know whether you see the videos, but there's some brave people going over to Calais, and they're recording what's happening in these migrant camps in Calais. And, it's absolutely crazy. They're selling life jackets. There's actually a market. I mean, I saw the video myself last week. There's a market stall in the camps selling life jackets from Decathlon. I mean, why are they selling life jackets? Well, it's obvious why they're selling life jackets. There's drug dealing going off over there. It's crazy. And the other thing, which is very, very scary, and I don't think it seems to be spoken about that much, is the fact that the people that are coming over in the boats, they're coming from other European countries, and many of them, some of them have actually even openly stated this in the video interviews that I've seen, that they're, for example, they may be in, let's say Belgium, and they've been in Belgium for 10 years. They may have criminal records in Belgium. They may be involved in various types of crime. If they move from Belgium to France can send them straight back to Belgium under the European Asylum and Returns Framework, because they're all part of the same group. They're all in Europe together. So they can send them back to the country that they came from. As soon as they get to the UK, then we can't send them back to Belgium easily. We can't send them back to France.
Yeah.
So and that sort of all happened since Brexit. And these people know that. They're not stupid. They're coming to Calais knowing that as soon as they set foot in the UK, then whether they've got criminal records or not, they are effectively going to be safe and secure in the UK, and they effectively can't be sent back. Well, while ever there's that incentive, and while ever the politicians are talking about it every day, the situation's getting worse. So for me, there is literally no alternative. Andy Burnham needs to grow a pair, and he needs to phone the head of the armed services tomorrow, and he needs to send them out in the channel to stop it. And whatever happens, whatever flack they get from France or
consequences,
they've got to say, no, sorry, this is now a major crisis. We are going to do what we need to do to protect the UK first, and then we'll argue with you later.
John, brilliant call. Let's not forget that Iran are reported to have been using illegal immigration to get terrorists into the UK. Let that sink in. And yet still not enough to wake up the establishment, who I think consider illegal immigration to be a byproduct of a caring, open society. They think it's empathy. Well, I think it's deeply wrong, and I think it's sick. But that's just my view. It is 2:32. You are listening to Talk. Lots more to come. And our phone number, 0344 499 1000. Should we deploy the Navy to stop the boats?
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk. Now.
Well, you are listening to Talk, and I've got to tell you we're having a very busy conversation, a full switchboard on the issue of illegal immigration. But what about this Cambridge professor who, it turns out, has peddled a lot of misinformation about his credentials, celebrated very much as this young black professor at Cambridge University? The problem is, it seems that his CV was about as accurate as that of Rachel Reeves. Remember her? Let's get reaction. Is this an example of DEI gone mad? Sean Walsh is a broadcaster and political commentator that's written a wonderful piece for Country Squire magazine. Good to see you, Sean.
And you, Mark, how are you doing?
Very well indeed. This is a great piece in your magazine there. So listen, fill my audience in. What exactly is the story here?
Well, I'll take you through the argument of the piece, if you like. The DEI side of it is interesting, but it's not the most interesting thing, I think. First of all, let's cut Cambridge University a little bit of slack and find the whole thing a little bit funny. This is not the worst thing that Cambridge University have given the world. They did give us the spy ring in the 1930s with Kim Philby, which nearly handed the whole country over to Joe Stalin. So a little bit of perspective. Secondly, this guy, Jason Arday, is creative. We've got to give him that. And whether or not he's a hero or a villain, I prefer to think of him, as I say in the piece, as a sort of accidental whistleblower. And what he's blown the whistle on is not just the practices of Cambridge University and their peer review stuff and how they select people, but on the whole discipline of sociology and those fake subjects in the social sciences generally, which I think, as I say, are fake subjects that trade in false equivalents, aren't concerned with truth, and are basically just disruptive sorts of political activism masquerading as scholarship. And I think he's shown people precisely what goes on there. Can you imagine, Mark, if this guy, say this guy blagged his way into the maths department, right? One of the maths professors there was impressed by the fact that he used to be a professional snooker player with one leg, or whatever else he says in that. He would have been busted within 10 minutes in a maths department or a physics department. But because he's a faker, he manages to get away with swimming in the warm waters of completely fake discipline. And that, I think, is the slightly more interesting point here. Now, I see Simon Evans, our mutual friend, has also written a piece on this in which he refers to something I wrote about a year ago in the Critic magazine, which is there are two types of dishonesty, one of which is worse than the other. There's lying, which is pretty bad, but then there's faking. And faking is worse than lying because the faker loses all track of the truth in the way that the liar doesn't. So I think that's what's happened with this guy. He's a faker who's just lost his way. But I also think that Cambridge University's sociology department and sociology departments in general, the subject of sociology in general, because it's fake, it didn't have the mechanisms in place to pick him up on it.
Well, I think that's a really interesting observation, actually, because, I mean, this guy was celebrated by the progressive left, wasn't he? Becoming the youngest black professor ever appointed to the University of Cambridge. And it's unfortunate, therefore, that he appears to be something of a charlatan. I mean, if we go through the rap sheet against him, it is pretty outrageous, isn't it? So, for example, let's have a look at the various allegations. His PhD thesis was considered to have been plagiarised.
Yeah.
He falsely claimed to have been a visiting professor at the University of Glasgow.
Yeah.
He claimed to have been on the 1970s TV show 7 Up, which he would have been too young for.
Taken out of context, apparently.
Oh, well, there you go. Good luck with that. He claims to have raised more than £5 million for charity, running 600 miles in 6 days.
Yeah.
Apparently, he carried out overseas work with WaterAid. Well, WaterAid said we don't send people to do overseas work. So the whole thing is an outrageous hot mess. And it is the progressive left who held this guy up as some kind of hero and maybe didn't subject him to the scrutiny and accountability that others might have?
Mark, these people claim that they are scientists of the sort. It's the social sciences that those are the people he worked with. It seems to me that these social scientists did not apply any sort of reasonable scientific skepticism to what he was telling
Right.
them. But it's not just the
because
fact that
they didn't want to have skepticism because this guy ticked a few boxes. Or am I being unfair?
No, you're not being unfair. And this is one of the problems with sociology, is that it replaces the language of normal human interaction with this fake scientific jargon, which makes it impossible to think about things properly. Now, it's an interesting point here, which is about the obligations people have about what they believe. And it's an interesting part of philosophy, actually. I won't go too far into it, but it's a bit too heavy for the sociologist types. People have obligations about the beliefs they have, in a way. You know, it's similar to the way they have obligations about the way they behave. People should not think in contradictions because it's bad for everybody. And that's what these sociologists and these social sciences types have been doing with this guy. And this is what they do in general. This guy was beyond criticism because he ticked certain identity boxes and they couldn't see past that.
Right.
And these people claim to be sorts of scientists. Well, there you go. If he blagged his way into the maths department and survived there, if he published some really good work on Fermat's last proof or whatever, this wouldn't have been a scandal. No one would have cared about his CV. It would have been the sequel to Good Will Hunting, wouldn't it? It would have been a fantastic story. But the fact is, he survived. He survived in social sciences because it's all rubbish, and he survived peddling rubbish. You don't get to become a professor just by appointment. You get to become a professor and get tenure because you are publishing all the time. So how did that happen? It happened because this is a discipline or a collection of disciplines which has no internal mechanisms for working out when it's going wrong. And it can't challenge itself when it goes wrong. And that's why it's not scientific.
And it's subsidised by the taxpayer. Sean, brilliant to have you on the show, because that was a great piece in Country Squire magazine. Let me direct my audience towards it. The title, Truth Not Credentials, which I think boils it down to 3 important words. Whilst I've got you, we have a new Prime Minister who addressed the nation from the steps of Number 10 just a couple of weeks ago. And he said his first policy was going to be to end rough sleeping, to end homelessness. Well, notwithstanding your successful journalistic career, in the past, you've found yourself sleeping rough. What did you make of that announcement by the new PM?
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for bringing that up. I'm grateful. Yeah, I was a rough sleeper between the years 2015 and 2017 for reasons we've talked about before. Now, what did I make of that? I actually wrote a piece on this. I think, again, it was for Country Squire magazine, actually, last week. I have a paradoxical view about this. I'm always happy when people bring up the subject of rough sleeping. But the mistake, if that's not too unkind a way of putting it, that Burnham is making here is in thinking that there is one thing called rough sleeping, whereas in fact it can be disaggregated into all sorts of different types of situations. So how, for example, do you sort out the problem of rough sleeping when a lot of people who are rough sleeping want to be rough sleepers? It's a very hard situation to live in Britain in 2026. We've got a government which for 2 years has been, to use the horrible term, gaslighting everybody, and everybody is affected by it. And some people, I'm afraid, are on the streets with real anxiety because of what this government and indeed previous governments have done to them. Lockdown being another example. I still do voluntary work in the homeless sector. I can tell you that made a massive difference to people's mental health with consequences. But fair play to Burnham for bringing it up. I know that one of your other contributors, Matthew Talbot's done work with Andy Burnham in the past on this, so I don't doubt his sincerity. But I'm just going to say good luck to him with it, and I hope he has a fair win with it. But I'm sceptical.
Sean, that's your job, and that's why you're a brilliant journalist. Thank you so much for joining us. Great piece in Country Squire. Sean's been on quite the journey, having rebuilt his life after a couple of years on the streets. An amazing story. Lots more to come. Should we deploy the Navy to stop the boats? How do you solve illegal immigration? Well, actually, let's squeeze in a quick call if we can. Scott is in Essex. Hello, Scott.
Hello. Yes, I think we covered this last year. I phoned in at one point. And the problem as I see it, if we try to do anything to push these people back, France will do everything they can to basically and ah and scream foul at anything we do. But if we were to reverse the flow and we had people leaving France and leaving England border and going over to France, you can bet the French Navy would be involved with the full backing of the European Council. The French would even call in the French fishermen to run interference with the full backing of the French police. And the French media will be branding us as evil and sadistic for dumping our unwanted people onto their problem. But that's exactly what they're doing to us. If we allow these boats to touch ground in England, they are English problems. So the only way we can solve them is to prevent them touching ground in England.
And is it going to happen? Will we ever stop the boats, Scott?
Unless we get quite brutally honest, I don't think we ever will. We've got too many hand-wringing, money-grabbing solicitors, lawyers and judges in this country, which are bleeding our coffers dry, funneling it into their pockets to defend people who don't deserve to be in this country, don't like this country, and are doing everything to undermine this country from being deported back to a country that they're more in favourable of. Unless we basically turn back the tide and say no more boats at all, which means putting a flotilla in, great job. Let's get the British fishermen, since I mentioned the French ones earlier. Let's run interference in the channel and prevent any of these boats landing. They'll all have to then go back to France, and France will kick hell. They do not like treating them the way they will treat us.
Do you think a change in the politics of France in a year's time could help if, for example, Le Pen gets in?
I think the only way this will get sorted is people like Le Pen do get in. There are things about Le Pen I do not like. But unfortunately, we've got too many people who are literally sitting at the border welcoming everyone in, and it's across the entire of Europe. We have France is in pain. We've got Germany kicking up a storm. Spain has now had their face slapped. All of them are now suddenly awakening to the fact that it's nice to welcome people in from around the world, as long as they wipe their feet on the doorstep and show respect. Many of these people are not.
And Scott, hand on heart, do you think we will ever stop the boats?
Only if Nigel Farage gets in and he does do his thing about using the Navy, but you're going to have all hell break loose in Europe because they will scream and holler about breach of human rights. But if all the British people go down to the British coast, we kick off with the French, with the English fishing boats and go, right, we are going to stop it. France has no option but to take them back, and then Europe will have to reverse the tide and push everyone back to the countries they've come back from, because this country and all countries in Europe are doomed to fail and die.
Scott, very well put. Lots more to come. Should we deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? Your call's next.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
A year ago to this day, we lost a legend of broadcasting and perhaps more importantly, a legend of talk. James Whale, your friend, my friend, our friend. A titan of radio and television. A disruptor, an entertainer, a provocative, intelligent, hilarious, charming, unpredictable man. And it's a year since we lost him, and every day we miss him on the airwaves. And on a personal note, we miss him because he was a terrific guy. It was a privilege to know him and a privilege to work with him. Let's take a little trip down memory lane and hear James Whale on Talk at his very best.
How you doing?
Good. Now, what do you want?
I don't want anything.
Thank you very much indeed.
Every night from 10 till 2, Whaley's on the line for you. Give me a ring. I'll be there, the mega mouth of radio air.
£300.
Let me just stop you for one moment. This was a section that was called Call Biggins. Did you want to ask a question to Christopher Biggins?
No.
Right. Where's your buzzer? No, I've got the frigging buzzer in here.
Everybody's good at cooking something, and I'm good at cooking crumble. Would you like some? What would you then?
Yes. How do you get such attractive women around you, Stanley? How does this work? I mean, what is there? What is there?
I feel very, very privileged.
And don't it feel good?
Yeah! I don't give a stuff whether she likes the show or not.
Most people who watch this show don't like it. That's a fact.
That's what happens.
That's what you get when you commentate it. You show your small nipples.
As far as I know, that kind of animal doesn't have any testicles.
He has.
No.
They're just under the desk.
There they are. I choose not to show them.
Do you remember, Sweet, when we went out to that nightclub in London called Stringfellows? Yeah, I thought you would.
I get a sense with him that he is quite he's a sensitive guy as well.
I remember listening to you, the midnight show. You were fantastic then.
Yeah, but if you heard it now, you'd probably think it was rubbish.
Did you get rid of him now?
When you hear shows that you hear in the past, you go, why didn't you think that was good?
Go on, take him up, get him up out the seat, move him out of the door. Lizzie Cundy has now kicked out Vladimir Putin. Call us, 0344 499 1000. Did you come here legally?
We actually managed to sneak in. Yeah.
Call the police.
I don't think you realise what you're saying. You're being insulting and rude.
That's the whole point of the restaurant.
Yeah, but it's not very pleasant.
No, well, you don't go there. It's like watching this. Don't go breaking my heart.
I couldn't if I tried.
Oh, honey, I can't hear
Wait for the beat, man.
You rang up for the text number.
To go live on air just to ask us for the...
Why the hell would you ring up for the text number?
Why didn't you just ask...
I thought I'd be able to speak to somebody to get it.
Well, we don't have that many people working here on this show. We're bloody busy.
Hold on, you wanted to go live on air to ask the question about that.
You're on air now. What is the question you wanted to ask?
She wants to know the text number. She just said it.
Oh, no,
87222, text the word talk in your message.
But what for? You're on... Just shush, you both. Get their mics on.
87222.
So what is it?
With the word talk at the beginning.
Oh, you must be really wealthy, James, to be able to get a good-looking lady like that when you're such a miserable, horrible sod. Well, she was very nice of them, really, but...
Yeah, we get that all the time.
Yeah, well...
Sadly, he's not, but I like him anyway.
James, one thing on my bucket list, I must be cut off by James Whale. Can you please...
Do you know...
Oh,
I love you.
When my time has come and I'm sadly gone, that people will talk about me and they will go back and show that. And that's what I will be remembered for. That is exactly what I will be remembered.
James Whale, we miss you, and we always will. A true legend. Folks, James would require that we continue the conversation. He was furious about illegal immigration. If he was sat here in this seat now, and I wish he was, he'd be like, stop those bloody boats and pull whatever levers you've got to, because it is a disgrace And James would be right. It's got to be sorted. Political will surely is the answer. Stuart in the Cotswolds. Mark, the French are in breach of maritime law by not rescuing a vulnerable craft in their waters and taking it to the closest safe port, i.e. France. Good point. Kevin's in Dorset. Hi, Kev.
Hi there, how you doing?
Very well, thanks for the call.
There's some really interesting stuff going on now, but look, I don't believe Andy Burnham's really committed. I don't believe Shabuna Mahmood is either. We're a sovereign country. We can do what we like. We're looking at young men coming over in dinghies, but also you're looking at people coming over on student visas that never see a classroom, on tourist visas that never go home. There is a whole raft of it. And if you think about all these people that go, oh, they're refugees. No, they're not. I'll tell you who are refugees. The women and children that came from Ukraine. The men stayed home. So why are there young men coming over? Why isn't it boatloads of women and children escaping and the men staying at home to fight for their country and to make their country a better place? We need to declare, in my view, a national emergency, because that is where we're heading. Do we have to wait for the train wreck before the government actually does something? Because we all know this is a stitch-up from beginning to end, whether it's visa overstayers, young men on boats. It's not like the Ukraine, and we saw who came over, women, children. What are we getting now? 90%, maybe even more, young adult males. And that's the case. I agree with, what you're saying, what James Whale would have said. We have to stop this. We're heading to hell in a handcart.
Well, also, it's not just the money, because it's $3 billion a year to accommodate these people. And by the way, you can quadruple that figure because the majority will stay and they'll be on benefits, a good majority of them, for the rest of their lives. Then it's obviously a societal disaster because there's an integration issue. Then there's safety, the safety of our citizens, because how many are criminals or rapists or God knows what else? Obviously not all of them, but a portion will. And then you've got, Kevin, national security, because the security services have been told that the boats are being used by regimes like Iran to get terrorists into the UK. If that's not enough of an excuse to deploy our armed forces, I don't know what is.
Yeah, and the terrorist threat at the moment is already severe. And we look at Trafalgar Square now. I mean, look at all that concrete furniture around one of the most beautiful landmarks in the centre of London, and it's destroying our way of life, and we're all having to lead smaller lives and pay more tax because of it. So it doesn't stack up whichever way you want to look at it. And I think that the bleeding heart Liberals have got to get real and understand the damage that is being done to our culture, our society, and how it is affecting just the ordinary person in the street.
And the problem is we have a governing party, Kevin, that don't really have a huge problem with illegal immigration. We've got a Prime Minister that says he's going to tackle this. Well, all he wants to tell us is that the numbers have gone down and he wants legal, safe routes. I mean, that is snake oil language, isn't it? That is shorthand for more illegal immigration.
Well, absolutely. And, I mean, you've got Andy Burnham. He's got the top job in the country, and he's gone on hollybobs. I mean, all right, have some time with your family, but why don't you just move your hollybobs until such time as you've got your feet under the table, understand what's going on in not just illegal immigration, but the economy, how we are being not just overtaxed by central government, but by local, all the unitary authorities, rates going up through the roof.
Yeah.
And then half of them set up a little parish council, because guess what? If they set up a parish council, and what's happened down in Poole is the Lib Dems thought they'd get control. They didn't actually, Reform did. And the Lib Dems, if they got control, would have moved all the services out of the bankrupt.
Well, listen, wise words, more to come. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good afternoon. It's coming up to 3 minutes past 3. Mark Dolan in for Ian Collins all of this week. And, of course, I'm back on Saturday and Sunday breakfast this weekend. And then, for a couple of weeks, I'm off on my holidays, as is the Prime Minister, Andy Burnham. Is that appropriate? He's wanted this job for a long time. Doesn't he need to make a plan for government? What is your reaction to the news that the Prime Minister has gone on holiday after just 2 weeks in number 10? Well, we have a developing story. A mega dinghy, as you'll have heard in that bulletin, has been rescued following a fire on the vessel with over 150 undocumented migrants on board. So another day, another reminder of the scale of this crisis following shocking scenes in the Spanish enclave of Ceuta. I still haven't quite cracked the pronunciation, but we'll be talking about it for a long time because it was a wake-up moment. So my question to you is very simple, because the Spanish actually used their boats to tackle this issue in Ceuta and return many of these migrants. So should we deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? My phone number is 0344 499 1000. Text the word talk in your message to 87222 or leave us a voice note. Ceuta. See, at least you know it's live. Now, if we deploy the Navy, it's going to be controversial. We will be an international pariah. It'll be a legal quagmire. There'll probably be a trade war with France. There will be diplomatic meltdown. We'll be compared to Russia and Belarus. But is it the right thing to do? Should we deploy the Royal Navy and use our military to stop illegal immigration? 0344 499 1000. Lots to get through. As the saying goes, let's talk. Now, the government have been forced onto the defensive after confirming that 2 of the men convicted over the 2019 killing of PC Andrew Harper remain eligible for early release, despite ministers tightening the scheme to exclude rapists, child sex offenders and groomers. Now, the decision has sparked outrage from PC Harper's family, police leaders and victims groups who argue that those responsible for killing a police officer should never benefit from early release. Let's get reaction from the former barrister Helen Fields. Good afternoon, Helen.
Good afternoon, Mark.
It was the most awful, wicked and egregious crime, and the least you can ask for is that the criminals involved face justice in all its forms.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't think that anybody really has any other view than everything you've just said. The difficulty is, of course, we've had early release in some form or another in this country for a very long time. So in the normal run of things, people would be eligible for early release. The government is talking about bringing some of those people into even earlier release. So the difficulty is this, because it's reactive lawmaking. They're reacting not to a sense of needing justice. They're reacting to the number of prison spaces that are available. And generally speaking, reactive lawmaking, we always know, has a lot of difficulties. So yes, there is a prison crisis in this country. And I think all that's happened is that the government has felt they had to draw a line somewhere. Now, it very much feels like suddenly saying, all right, rapists, child sex offenders, groomers, that felt quite political, I have to say, because what they didn't do is go on to think about, there are so many other criminals that should not fall into the early release category. So they just landed on a few categories, but one can understand completely why, in circumstances that that PC Harper's family are facing, feel absolutely appalling.
And the assault or murder of a police officer must always be an aggravating factor when it comes to any sentence.
Yes, I mean, in fact, PC Harper's death led to some new sentencing guidelines so that we now know that if an officer is killed, in fact, what we would call a blue light or emergency service worker is killed, not just murder, but manslaughter. That's the really important thing in this case now, is that a life sentence will ensue. So things have changed slightly. And I think all that really needs to happen in this case to do justice is to say that the other category we're going to add on is for anybody who has caused the death of an emergency service worker should not be facing early release. That would cover this case completely, but actually it does something just as important as that, which is that it maintains and continues our need as a society to protect emergency service workers when they are putting their lives on the line for us every day, and it includes paramedics and all sorts of other people. But it would mean that these young men, still young men, were not eligible for early release. That doesn't mean they're not going to be released until the very end of their sentence. It just means that the normal guidelines would apply. And I'm sure that that is what most people want to happen in this case.
And I think one has to offer a note of sympathy to the government because they've been in power for 2 years. This is not actually a crisis of their making, is it?
It isn't. We've had a prison place crisis in this country for, I mean, you're talking over a decade in reality. And the difficulty and the reason that this has suddenly become a real problem is because the expectation is that we'll run out of prison places in October. So Andy Burnham has pushed this back till October, the first tranche of early releases. But we do still need to do something definitely by November. If these additional people, and we're talking about a few thousand, are not released early, we're literally going to run out of prison places. So the sad thing is at some point, something has got to give. So the problem we're facing is that there aren't enough, literally beds. They're already putting multiple beds in each prison cell. People aren't getting out of their cells. They're in there for 23 hours, sometimes out of 24. It's very unhealthy. And what it means is at the end of the day, you release very unhealthy people physically and mentally back into society. We don't want that either. So it's not a question that the government is doing something ridiculous for no reason. It's just that without either new construction or massive amounts of input into the prison service, we do have to do something. And of course, the other problem is you can't look at every single case individually. That's just not feasible with the number of people we have incarcerated in this country. So there have to be guidelines, there have to be categories, there have to be rules. But in this case, I do think there is that one easy fix of saying nobody who caused the death of an emergency service worker should be eligible for release. And I think that does solve this particular problem.
And our justice system always seems to be at the back of the queue for funding, doesn't it, Helen? Maybe because it's not quite as politically potent as other areas that lie within the scope of government. And this, as you say, goes back a long time. I mean, in 2010, under, I think it was Justice Secretary Kenneth Clarke, with austerity, there were cuts of 40% to the Justice Department. Then, of course, there was COVID and there were efforts to expand the prison estate, which were paused because of the pandemic. So this is a multitude of factors as to why we are where we are.
Yeah, and it's not a vote winner, and everybody knows that. No one wants to vote for a government that suddenly pours millions. Frankly, what's needed is a couple of £1 billion going into the prison service and the criminal justice service. But we all get served by making sure that dangerous people are off the streets, that people get proper treatment, that people are released in a safe way back into the community. And of course, we have to remember that not everyone who's accused of a crime is guilty. Those people who face trial who are not guilty also need a fully funded and proper criminal justice system, so that we make sure that no one who is innocent ends up, being convicted. So we need to put a lot of money into the criminal justice system. It's not popular. No one wants to do it. But the truth is that if we want to solve these kinds of problems, that is what has to happen.
And just a few weeks ago, we lost our good friend Anne Widdecombe. She was a regular on Talk. Helen, I don't know if you ever crossed paths with her, but she was a former prisons minister under John Major, if memory serves me right. And notwithstanding her robust conservative credentials, she really believed very passionately that prison should be a constructive environment. And she thought it was a great priority that rehabilitation should be what happens when you go to jail. But if you haven't got the space and you don't have the resources, it ain't going to happen.
Yeah, exactly that. Anne Whitaker was a tour de force, and it didn't matter whether you agreed with her or not. She always had a considered opinion, and this, I think, is an area where she really knew what she was talking about, and she did that job very well. Because it's about prison being useful, because there is no point locking people up for 10 years if they're going to come out more dangerous. That's not what we want. It doesn't protect society. It doesn't do anyone any good. And yes, part of a prison sentence is there to punish, but part of it is there to make absolutely sure that we then reduce the risk to the good men and women on the streets who are paying their taxes and who take no part in crime. We all deserve that protection. And so Anne Whitaker was exactly right in saying that prison has to be a constructive experience. So the point really is that it's loss of liberty that is the punishment, but we can, and other countries do, use prison more usefully to make sure that we reduce the risk of recidivism, reoffending, when people come out. And, you know, it's something that we still haven't quite got right yet, and that is definitely related to investment in the prison service. We need better education in prisons, better socialisation, better links to communities before people come out, and that is going to be long-term the best way to keep all of us safe.
Notwithstanding the most serious crimes, Helen, do you think there are too many people in jail?
I certainly think there are too many people. There are two aspects to this. I think there are too many people going to prison for things that don't truly require it, where we could better make them pay a penalty and make them, you know, effectively be educated about what they've done. And we've seen a spate of these things, people going to prison for quite a long time for tweets and things like this. You know, we really do have to get to grips with where, you know, prison spaces need to be used. But the other thing is there are some very, very long-term prisoners inside who, frankly, at this stage, prison won't do any more good. So, and this is controversial, but for example, you know, murders from 20 years ago. Now, this is a really big problem because the families of the murdered people are still there. And of course they want a full sentence and justice, quite rightly too. But at the same time, after 20 years, for example, if prison is no longer going to change anything and we're just creating a worse problem by keeping people there, we need to explore whether or not there are really severe lifestyle restrictions. And to be fair, the government's talking about this for early release prisoners. They're talking about keeping them confined within geographical zones, better tagging so that we know where these people are, better reporting. So they are starting to look at this with early release. But we do need to think about whether or not, when people have served a really long sentence, those people can be released in a way that is more constructive overall.
Fascinating conversation. Helen, thank you so much. Helen Fields is a former barrister who's pointed out just how depleted our prisons system is. We are just a few months away from our prison estate being full. Let that sink in. Another example, I hate to say, of broken Britain. And this one we can't really blame Labour for. This has happened over decades. So what about illegal immigration? Should we deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? Dan is in Portsmouth. Hello, Dan.
They don't want to stop the boats. We need to admit that. They don't want to stop the boats, and there's a simple reason. Illegal immigration is a red herring, all right? It's there to take our eye off the ball. As unpalatable as the illegal immigrants are, and I don't want any of them here, the problem is legal migration, which knocks illegal migration in the numbers out of the park.
It's off another scale, isn't it?
And legal migration can be stopped at the stroke of a pen, without breaking any laws, but they haven't got the courage or the political will to do it. So the boats take our eye off what the real problem is. It's as simple as that.
The difference, though, with illegal versus legal immigration is that those coming legally, Dan, must present their papers. At least we know their background.
Yeah, well, so yeah, that's true, but it's still a massive problem. When you've got somebody come in to study and they can bring up to 10 to 12, you know, they bring in all kinds of family that are never going to contribute, they're never going to be part of society. They're going to drift. Some of those will drift into. I'm not saying the illegal migrants aren't a huge problem. They are. It needs sorting. But the bigger problem, the bigger issue is legal migration, and the boats take our eye off the ball.
Well, that's a really interesting point, and you are right, because legal migration comes with a huge bill. Like, Dan, if we look at the so-called Boris wave, 2.5 million people over 5 years, only 20% of those people came on a work visa. The rest will likely be dependent on the state for the rest of their lives. Some are predicting that the long-term cost of the Boris wave could be £500 billion.
And that is what's changing the fabric of our society. That is what it's legal migration that is changing this country, making it unrecognisable. That's what's doing it, not the boats. The boats are unpalatable. I don't want them. They can be stopped, but they're never going to do it, because that will take our eye off the ball.
Dan, you raise a good point, because the people crossing the channel, obviously some may have terror links and be criminals, but the majority are basically probably just chancers that want to get over here and make a bit of dosh and have a better life. But your argument is that the legal migration is a bigger problem.
Yeah, definitely. And I don't actually agree with you. I think more and more now. Where are ISIS? Where do people think ISIS went? They're in HMOs. That's where they are. So, no, I disagree with that. But, yeah, for me, the bigger problem, the problem that's destroying the face of this country, the problem that's changing our everything about the country is legal migration, and it's not, because you call it legal, it sounds legitimate.
Yeah.
It's still it's still not legitimate. It's dreadful. It's not necessary. We can train our own people.
It's not high quality. It's not high quality immigration, which we used to have. And Dan, the way I describe it, I look at immigration in the 70s and 80s. I call that immigration.
Good immigration.
Wasn't it? It was immigration 1.0. People coming from India and from Africa. You've got nurses, doctors, engineers.
Diversity. A little bit of diversity, which came in, added to the culture, benefited, worked. No, that was good. That was good.
Yeah, and very much becoming British. See, what happened, Dan, it was the socialist project of multiculturalism, which told people from overseas, not only do you not have to integrate, actually don't integrate, because who'd want to be British these days? We're awful and wicked and bad.
Yeah, can't agree enough.
Now, Dan, what about the future then? I mean, can we save the country? What's going to happen?
No, the government won't. The government won't. It will decay into civil unrest and disorder. The only people that stop the boats are the people, and eventually that's what will happen. The government will never do anything.
Well, this is what Elon Musk has been saying, Dan. He thinks it will end up just on the streets.
100%. It's inevitable. 100% inevitable.
And how does that play out? What happens then?
Who knows? I mean, who knows? That's unknown territory. But we won't be the first. We're arrogant to think.
Well, I think I might have the answer, Dan. What you will then have is authoritarian rule.
Well, and maybe that's what they've had their eye on the whole time.
Powerful words, Dan. Really enjoyed your thoughts. Please call me again soon. A very sober conversation, but Dan there with a very apocalyptic view of what's happening. And his argument is that the boats are bad, and there are people coming across who may be criminals and have terror links. As he said, what about ISIS? They're in the HMOs. But his argument is the bigger problem is legal net migration. What have we done, folks? What have we done? This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Now, I've got to say that my fantastic colleague Freddie has been out and about putting a question to the great British public. Andy Burnham has become Prime Minister and he's already gone on holiday. He's been number 10 for 2 weeks and he is off ski. So do you think he's earned a break or should he be staying in the country and getting on with the job? Take a listen to this.
No. He's gone on holiday to where?
So people are speculating somewhere in Europe, but that's not confirmed.
Oh, okay. No, I don't think he deserves his holiday. Get to work, man. Get to work, bro.
Well, he's been through quite a lot recently, so yes.
I think he's got a lot on his plate at the moment and lots of very pressing issues to deal with. Probably now is not the best time to be going abroad and taking that break at the moment. I think he's definitely allowed to take time off, and otherwise his job would be completely unsustainable, but maybe not right now.
I think everyone's on holiday. He's been working all year, not just the 2 weeks, is he? I mean, it's a job. Yeah. But everyone has holiday.
I don't think any of them are any good. I'm over politics completely.
That's a tough question. It's subjective for many reasons. You just get on the job, so yeah, ideally you probably wouldn't go on holiday as you just got in. But then you don't know the situation. Was the holiday organised before, he got the job?
It was organised before.
Yeah, what's the holiday for? Is it an anniversary? Family comes first. There's a lot of variables to that question.
Brilliant stuff. My thanks to Freddie Needham for that Vox Pop. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Love to hear the voice of the people, which is why I'm delighted that Vince has joined us from West Sussex. Afternoon, Vince. Oh, my goodness, Vince, what's going on there?
Sorry, mate.
You're busy, right? Yeah, let me guess, you are working, contributing to the unstoppable powerhouse that is the British economy.
Yes, I'm 71 and I'm still working.
My goodness. May I ask what you work at, Vince?
Oh, I'm just a little delivery driver, just a little part-time job to see me through with a few extra quid a week.
Nothing little about it. It's an important job. You're part of the infrastructure of our economy. Deliveries are critical for that. And Vince, if you think about it, you're working hard to make ends meet and a bit of extra cash in your back pocket. The tax that you pay on your hard work doesn't even touch the sides when it comes to the cost of illegal immigration.
That's right. It's hideous. My wife and I sit there exasperated sometimes, that we're both pensioners and yet we're still paying tax.
Yeah.
And I don't get any benefit from the tax. Okay, I've got the NHS and et cetera, but that, I worked for 51 years full time. I had a good job and I was paying 40% tax. I've got no issue with that, about paying my tax as long as it's a benefit for the country, not just for the chosen few, which it appears to be at the moment.
Well, this is it. So how do you feel when you see footage of these boats crossing the channel? Or if I give you one statistic, Vince, which is that last Wednesday, 750 people came in, the majority of whom will stay?
Well, I'm exasperated is the word.
Yeah.
I'm frustrated because I feel that there is no will, as a lot of your listeners have said recently.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a political will to do it. I believe it could be stopped. It would take a little while, but I think in a matter of months you could stop it. My view is, let's not keep battling the French. Let's try to reach some compromise. Let's say we give the boat people exactly what the French give their illegal immigrants, which I believe is pretty much next to nothing.
Yeah, correct.
So we would use that with the French because that would encourage people not to go into France to get to England. We would then not get people going into France to get to England to arrive here and live a life of Riley. So I think it would benefit everybody. That if we just, right, okay, let's stop the draw, because we know the UK is a draw because they get homes, they get food, they get a mobile phone, they get doctors, they get dentists, etc., 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 all from the hard-working taxpayers of this country. They don't get that in France. So let's do it exactly the same what the French are doing. Nobody then can complain because we can say, well, the French do it, and they're in Europe and the ECHR, and there's no problem with them doing what they do. So why not? Why don't we do the same?
Because, Vince, everything in human nature is about incentives, isn't it? It's like the benefit system. 600,000 households, Vince, are now better off not working. That is the wrong incentive. Illegal immigrants coming to the UK because they'll be treated better here than in France, it's an incentive. They go to an HMO or a hotel, they get pocket money, it's an incentive.
Indeed. You know, I see it a lot. I can't reveal how I work and who I work for.
Yeah.
But I see a lot of people who are not working and readily taking deliveries of Uber Eats, Just Eat, goodness knows what else, standing by their front door waiting for a delivery. Now, I have to go to Tesco's and do my shopping and cook my food. There they are, sitting at home, watching TV, getting their food delivered in, all at the taxpayer's expense. And I know they're not working.
Well, of course you know, because you can observe their activities and whether they're in and out of the house going off to put a shift in. And there you are in your 70s, Vince. I'm not trying to wind you up, but you're in your 70s. You should have your feet up. Naturally, you've chosen to work because I think you've got the work ethic, all the rest of it. But it's just wrong. It's just the setup is wrong.
Yeah, well, it is. It's completely and utterly wrong. You know, as I say, I have no issue with me paying my tax. I've been doing it all my life and I've got no issue with that. However, it's the fact that my tax is misspent over and over again on hideous projects and systems and welfare benefits. That, to me, it's just a complete whitewash of how the system is supposed to work.
Well, Vince, the other day I was just walking down the street and there were a group of blind people. I think they'd been to some sort of performance and they were being guided by a couple of helpers, but maybe sort of 8 or 9 blind people walking along the street. And I thought, that's why I pay my taxes.
Yes.
So that those people who do not have the gift of sight can enjoy some state support. That's why we pay our taxes.
Yeah, absolutely. My neighbour has a severely disabled daughter.
Right.
Who is in a home. She's physically and mentally disabled. And she's in a home and it's pretty much taxpayer funded. I have no issue whatsoever. Good luck to whatever they can get. Because, you know, it's a hard life for my neighbour and the daughter. And, you know, that to me, that's where my tax should be going. But unfortunately, you know, you've got people with anxiety and this made-up name ADHD, which is basically somebody who's a bit of a slow learner who just wants a few extra lessons. And then you've got this, autism, which again is, you know, I went to a comprehensive school of 1,300 pupils, and I don't think there was one of those 1,300 pupils in the late 60s, early 70s, who had any learning difficulties. You had different streams because some were a little bit quicker than others.
Of course.
But they didn't have labels. They weren't given labels. They weren't given special treatment. They weren't given, or their mum and dad wasn't given extra benefits because they've got ADHD or whatever it might be. You know, and I actually know one of those pupils, a friend of mine who I went through school with, who was in the lower stream than me. He's now a millionaire. He's working. He's living the life of luxury.
Which
and I still
goes to show you.
And I still am in contact with him. He's still the same guy I knew when I was at school. He wasn't academically brilliant, but he didn't have a label. He left school, he rolled his sleeves up, and hey presto, he's now living the life of Riley.
Vince, before I let you go, is there anyone out there that can save the country, have some common sense policies, sort out the economy, stop the boats? Is there anyone out there?
I think there is. And I lived through the Thatcher era, and I wish we had another Margaret Thatcher, but we haven't. But we've got a very close equivalent and that's Kemi Badenoch. I think she could be the one. I really do. I see in that lady very, very determined. She's not a pushover by any stretch of the imagination.
Nope.
She's got the same kind of grit as Margaret Thatcher had, and she's also got a certain way about her. Certain people, and it tends to be, funny enough, ladies, they have these ways about them where they're almost immovable, and I love that in a person. And I think Kemi Badenoch, I'm probably going to get a load of abuse for this, but I really do think that she is the new Margaret Thatcher, and I think she could make a great difference.
Vince, what a brilliant call. Please call me again soon. I know you're a busy man doing your extra shifts as a delivery chap, but it was important what you've told me and our audience. It was really important to get it out there as a matter of record about how the education system has changed, about how we didn't have ADHD and anxiety in the 1960s, even though there was actually a lot more poverty and deprivation then. What about the Second World War? When German bombs were raining over our great cities, where was the stress and anxiety and ADHD then? Answers on a postcard. Lots more to come. Should we deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats?
Across the UK, on DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
You are listening to Talk. So many calls and texts coming in across a range of issues, particularly in regard to the hardy perennial of illegal immigration. By the way, what about this from Steve in Manchester? Afternoon, Mark. Don't complain that Burnham's away on holiday. I'd prefer him to stay on holiday permanently. Carrie in West Berkshire says, hi, Mark. Andy Pandy going on holiday. I detest the Labour Party, the people and the lefties of all shapes. But aren't they all on holiday at the moment? If so, who else is around for him to bounce ideas and policies off anyway? To be fair to him, and that hurts, just saying it, any time he takes a holiday will be bad timing, as there's so much CRAP to sort out in this country. Just my thoughts. Great show, mate. And here's to a better future, hopefully with reform in charge, says Carrie. I hope I said your name correctly. Thank you for that. Folks, can we talk about education now, because it is so critical, because as Michael Jackson famously sang, the children are our future. And there's an interesting story floating around, and it's Lucy Powell, who has said that schooling is straitjacketed and it's left millions of youngsters behind. Now, of course, she's the Education Secretary. Forcing schools to prioritise academic learning has directly led to 1 million young people not in formal study, training or work, according to Powell. In an article for the Times newspaper, she said schools were stuck in a straitjacket of being forced to prioritise only academic subjects such as English, science and history that had led to millions of children being branded a failure again and again and again. She said she intended to take a fresh look at what we're teaching our children and whether we're equipping them for their lives ahead. Let's get reaction from the brilliant Chris McGovern, chairman of the Campaign for Real Education, former head teacher as well. Hello, Chris.
Hello there.
Lovely to see you again. What's your reaction to Lucy Powell's comments?
My reaction is, Lucy Powell, I think, is going to be a real problem for our education system because she has tended to downgrade the importance of knowledge and talk about creativity. Now, creativity is important, but she's objecting to things like spelling tests and so forth. So all children need a straitjacket of basic literacy, basic numeracy, basic knowledge. But as with all politicians, she gets some things right. And I sat around the table with Michael Gove on several occasions, fruitlessly. I didn't get him to do what I wanted him to do. But she's right on one thing, and I think Burnham's right on one thing, which is that too many young people who are not academic are still doing academic courses. And I would say probably Burnham has got it right to say from the age of 14, we need to have the academic kids doing academic courses, and those other children who are not academic need to be geared towards vocational courses. So Lucy Powell, I fear, is going to get a lot of things wrong, but she's not entirely wrong on this, and therefore not without some justice that she's made that remark.
And I wish that politicians did not influence our education policy so aggressively, Chris. It really ought to be what's in the best interests of the pupils, but you do see more left-leaning governments come in with certain policies, right-leaning governments come in and they go the other way. And I'm a bit worried about the progressive left because I think that just culturally, philosophically and ideologically, they're not that keen on testing and on exams and on accountability. Is that a fair appraisal?
I think it is. I think problems are there. Certainly the left is dominant in our education system. Most teachers tend to be on the left, and they tended to oppose assessment. And I think assessment is extremely important. Where the Tories go wrong, or have gone wrong, is that they're claiming today in the newspapers, how much they raised standards when they were in power after 2010. And that seems all very convincing. It's trotted out as a mantra now. The Tories raised standards. Well, actually, they didn't really raise standards because they say we raised standards on the international tests from 2010. And they say in 2022, when we last had those tests, we had improved. What they don't tell you is if you go back to the year 2000, they were actually higher then. So they say the base mark is 2010. Well, let's start with the year 2000, and you'll see in those international tests we went backwards. Now, where we did improve, and we have improved to some extent, they are also getting it wrong because on the test they're talking about, we excluded about a third of the children, and they were sat under COVID conditions. And to be honest, we should have been disqualified from the tests. They also say we've done very well in reading. Well, we have, I think, partly because of our campaign group promoting the use of what's called phonics. Reading has improved. And they say we're now 4th in the world. But that's, again, slightly misleading because the tests themselves, when they were set, weren't very sound. And if I said to you, rather than saying we're 4th in the world, how about saying we're catching up on Russia? Because they're ahead of us on reading. That doesn't sound such a good headline, does it? So, look, there's a problem here. And also, by the way, one reason why our scores generally have gone up since 2010 is not because the scores on international tests are higher, they're actually lower. It's because the rest of Europe did even worse than us. So we're doing better than the other ones who did worse than us. So our scores today are better than they were 10, 15 years ago because other countries have done worse in Europe. But if you go to the Far East, so Eastern Asia, Singapore, Shanghai, Japan, Taiwan, they're miles ahead. So they're 3 years ahead by the age of 15.
Which takes me to my next point, which is this is not about money, Chris.
No, it's never been about money. We spent a lot of money on education since the Second World War, in fact, since the 1950s, we've increased expenditure in real terms on education by about 900%. It's massive. But we haven't seen anything like that improvement at all. I mean, it's incredible how much we've spent. We're amongst the biggest spends on education. Look, those aren't my words. They're what organisation called the OECD, the big international number crunchers. They say there are poorer countries, take Vietnam as an example, I often choose. They're doing better than us. They spend about a tenth of what we spend. So it's not about money, it's how you use the money.
A tenth?
It's how you...
They spend a tenth. So they might spend a ballpark figure of maybe 6, 7, 8 billion a year compared to our 60.
Yeah, and those figures, Chair. I haven't got the figure in front of me.
Right.
So maybe 10, 15, but it's a tiny amount compared to what the UK is spending. And they're not alone in that. And they've done extremely well. It's about the quality of the teaching and the quality of the curriculum, and also, crucially, parental support. The children in Vietnam, they have a lot of parental support. They do in Eastern Asia. And we know we talk about education, we talk about on the TV, on the radio. It's a bit of a Cinderella subject, but it's not actually. It's so important because our economy in 20 years' time is going to be determined what happens today in our schools. That's it. They don't get a second choice. And we've spent the last 20 or 30 years running down our education system. And by the way, very hard truth, it's going to take 20 years to put it back together again. A long time to educate children properly, but we've got to give it a go.
We've obviously had a lot of conversations in recent times about mental health, and I do think, Chris, that, for example, the COVID lockdowns were particularly damaging to young people. I objected to those policies during the pandemic, given the fact that children faced a very low statistical threat from the virus. We stuck them at home, we locked them in their bedrooms, they couldn't use the playgrounds, they couldn't meet their friends, they couldn't have face-to-face learning, and I think we're dealing with the legacy of that. But COVID notwithstanding, do you think we also need at school to teach children resilience, to have figures in the classroom who will explain that actually life is difficult and you're going to have tough days?
It's crucially important, and that's why the quality of the teachers comes. That's crucially important. We don't need to have quite so many. We have a lot of classroom assistants in schools. I mean, there are more non-teaching staff than teaching staff in our schools. We need great teachers who inspire kids, and of course, COVID had an impact. But no, our organisation, the Campaign for Real Education, we were almost alone amongst the organisations like education organisations in saying, for heaven's sake, keep the schools open. But they didn't listen, of course. They closed the school. It did do a lot of damage, but resilience is incredibly important. And we have it too easy in many respects. So now we've sort of become welfare dependent. Whilst I'm in favour of the welfare state, I'm not in favour of welfare dependency and young people staying at home in bed, watching whatever, midday TV and so forth, and doing nothing, They should be working. And what's more, young people want to work, which is why I come back to the point. Thank goodness, at least give Burnham some credit. He said, from the age of 14, some of these kids need to be learning a trade. My mum used to say to me, Chris, learn a trade. But let's take a hairdresser. People also need their hair cut, Mark. Let's take bricklayers, electricians, roofers, plumbers. We need these people to build houses. So for heaven's sake, let's get away from this idea that every kid does an academic course. And by the way, if we were to raise the standard up to before the age of 14, I mean, we're about 3 years behind the kids in Korea and so forth, in South Korea and so forth. We need to raise the level in primary schools and in secondary schools so that by the age of 14, they can take GCSE. In a few weeks' time, we're going to be discussing GCSE results without realising that that's what they're doing in primary school in South Korea.
Thank you, Chris. Catch up soon. Chris McGovern, chairman at the Campaign for Real Education. Always enjoy having Chris on. Lots more to come, folks, before 4 o'clock. The brilliant Kevin O'Sullivan is live thereafter. But I'm going to conclude our conversation about the Royal Navy and the boats. Your calls next. This is Talk.
across the UK. On DAB+, on YouTube, on your mobile, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Jana, Finley, Amy, Faith and Luke for all their help today. It's been a very busy show. I'll be back tomorrow at 1. And let's get to your text before I take a call. Should we deploy the Royal Navy to stop the boats? What about this from Peter in Kenilworth? Hi, Mark. What if our nearest neighbour was Iran rather than France? Would we be as happy to receive the boats? Steve in East Yorkshire, under international maritime law, nations have an obligation to stop unseaworthy boats setting sail, especially where there is a risk to human life. So why aren't we taking France to court for not meeting their obligations? Lee in Walsall, hi Mark, there's only one reason why the UK and France are allowing the boats to come here. It's punishment for Brexit. Becca says, Mark, if we don't intercept the boats, our people, our culture and our country dies. So I know which one I would rather. Never mind dropping them back to the beach in France, says Sarah. Take them back to a beach in the south of France. So they've got a long way to go before they can try again. Plus, they'll be back at home. Hi, Mark. The easiest and cheapest way to stop the boats is to remove one fishing licence for every boat that comes across. The French fishermen would soon stop the boats coming, so no cost to us. There are so many messages and they're all incredibly good. What about this? Alison says, hi, Mark. Yes to the Navy stopping the boats. If the top brass don't like it, then they're failing in their duty to king and country. I sincerely hope that at the next general election, people will vote for the good of this country and not because they've always voted Labour or Conservative. Interesting stuff. We'll keep those messages coming. I'm delighted to welcome David in Exeter. Lovely part of the world. Hello, David.
Hi, Mark. Yeah, it is. It's superb. Not least, it's incredibly near to Lympstone, where all those Royal Marine Commandos are trained.
Well, there you go.
Yeah, I was assisting Anne Widdecombe, your friend of mine, for some years in defence, security and veterans lawfare.
Oh, wow.
And in the last few years before her murder, one of the things we were trying to focus on was in what state did the Royal Navy actually exist? And trying to sort of have that conversation about sort of where we were, where we are at the point now.
Yeah.
And I think where Farage and Reform are concerned, where they've sort of launched this policy yesterday, it's very apt in so many ways because of the conversations Anne and I were having on this subject. So, well, she was hoping Danny Kruger was going to do something coherent and push some coherent policy out. I'm afraid this is what sort of Farage has pushed out yesterday, particularly as he's launched it with a graphic from HMS Ocean, which we sold to Brazil in 2018.
Not great.
It's not the best start, but really people have sort of got to understand, Mark, and I hope you can sort of appreciate this. Is sort of the successive governments over quite some time have took the Navy out of the Navy. This is a Blair Cameron problem. This is a long-standing problem. Where there just isn't the capabilities there, and currently, really, the Navy sort of just exists in a bilateral and multilateral patchwork of defence agreements, principally of which the primary one is with France. So you could sort of say that the Royal Navy and the French Navy more or less are the same thing. So, and that goes from Trident nuclear deterrent and their force to FRAP down throughout the rest of the sort of boats and ships. So it's not like we can really get into a big argument with France and their Navy and our Navy, because essentially, Mark, really, they're actually the same thing. Could the Royal Navy act? Could the Royal Navy act independently? Well, you may be if it was something particular, but at the moment it's falling between two stools. It couldn't really act independently, and this was highlighted by Admiral Sandy Woodward in 2010 when Cameron really took the death nail to it, which was he said that the Navy couldn't really do anything further than the other side of the channel at that stage because there wasn't the capabilities there. So this is a technical argument as well as all the rest of it. But Anne was actually right with what she was saying with this problem. It's a multifaceted problem. Deploying any kind of naval capability, but let alone the Royal Navy in the Channel to deal with this, it's much, much bigger than that, and she was right. But my focus of attention with Anne was where we were in our overall defence condition, which is woeful.
It's pathetic, and we're spending all our money on the wrong things, David, with the welfare bill being bigger than the income tax take of the country, and yet we're running out of prison places and we've got a hollowed out military. Priorities all wrong.
Correct. Yeah, I think one thing we've got to look at this, if you're saying that there's a concern here with national security, with potential Iranian Republican Guard coming across under cover of all of this.
ISIS, all the rest of it, yeah.
Yeah, all of that. This is a question for Jonathan Powell, the National Security Advisor, who won't go before Parliament. He's been reappointed by Burnham. He's a political appointee. He's not been vetted, I understand. So the focus of attention in all of these areas needs to go on to him personally. Why? Jonathan, explain to us, if this is a problem, why it's not being dealt with. If you think that there are terror cells being, literally transiting at will with this, why are they not being stopped? And Anne she said to me many times that she'd suggested that the best way of dealing with this, as soon as they arrive on the shore, is they're interned and they are put it into secure locations whilst they are then vetted and dealt with.
Thank you very much.
She was told numerous times by the civil servants, we're back to Powell and Antonio Romero, all these people, that they couldn't do it, wouldn't do it, can't do it, all these excuses as to why they couldn't do this. But of course, if we withdrew the draw on the benefits and so on, that would be a factor.
Well, yeah, I mean, David, sorry, apologies. I've just got to crack on because I'm going to squeeze another call in. But all those points are really right. The biggest thing that we need is to undo the legal and constitutional framework of the country so that we can detain people when they enter the country illegally, that we can deport foreign criminals, and that we have sovereignty, which was the whole point of the Brexit vote. Because at the moment, it's a complete joke. We've got Brexit, we're out, and yet still we are powerless. David, I wish we had longer. We'll speak soon. Chris is in East Sussex. Chris, you get the final word of the show. Afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon. I'm a retired probation officer. I'm really concerned about the release of prisoners early.
Yeah.
The probation service, there aren't enough officers who are already swamped. Secondly, they cannot, they say they're going to tag them, but the system only allows for either domestic violence tags or acquisitive offending tags. So the systems are going to have to change, otherwise the applications will be rejected and that will cost millions of pounds. Thirdly, they cannot be tagged if they do not have accommodation. The accommodation, Class 3 and the approved premises have been completely depleted and are rare as hen's teeth. The councils are turning their backs because they're saying people have made themselves homeless. There are no accommodation. They cannot be tagged. Also, how are you going to write a license if you don't know, with all the restrictions, with all the sort of restricted area, maps restrictions, GPS tagging requirements, if the person has no accommodation to go to? You used to be able to do licenses right up to the date of release, but if you don't do one within 24 hours of the release time, the system shuts down and it just issues a generic license which does not protect anyone. It is an absolute disgrace. So if you think, we're going to tag everybody, no, you'll have to change the laws and rules of the probation legislation in order to make sure that everyone can be tagged. At the moment, it's only acquisitive offending and domestic violence. So if you think you can just slap a tag on them. Also, the waiting time for tags, it can take weeks, and sometimes it doesn't work, and they just cut the tags off. So again, last winter, there's no accommodation. Last winter, all I was able to give offenders, some of whom were drug addicted, was a bag of food and a sleeping bag. There is no accommodation because other people are being prioritised. So how is the tagging? If you're a traveller, you can